The Opium Wars were a series of conflicts fought over the lucrative drug trade in mainland China during the 19th century. Despite having greater numbers, China would struggle against the technologically superior British, who were determined to protect their colonial interests. Ultimately, the Opium Wars would cement European hegemony in Asia by opening this once untouchable nation. Here's what life was really like during the Opium Wars. Before we start, likes and subscribes help me keep making these. Where are you listening from? Drop your city and time in the comments. I'm always reading them thinking, wait, people in New Zealand listen to history stories to sleep? We're heading to 19th century China in a minute. First, though, get comfortable. Seriously, take a second. Adjust whatever needs adjusting. You're not going to want to move once we start. The morning fog hangs thick over the Pearl River. You open your eyes in your cramped quarters aboard a British merchant ship anchored off the coast of Canton. The wooden planks creak beneath you as the vessel gently rocks. Outside, you can already hear the shouts of Chinese sampan operators ferrying goods and passengers to shore. It's 1830, and you're one of Britain's many ambitious merchants hoping to make a fortune in the China trade. Unlike your comfortable bed back home, you're sleeping on a narrow bunk in a cabin that smells of mildew, salt, and that faint hint of opium that never quite washes away. You rise and splash your face with water from a basin. The water's brackish, not like the clean glass by your bedside right now. Through the small porthole, you can see the sprawling city of Canton, the only Chinese port where foreigners like you are allowed to trade. And even here, you're restricted to a tiny area known as the 13 Factories. A small strip of land where Western merchants are corralled like expensive cattle. Morning, calls your business partner Thomas as you emerge on deck. Tea prices are up again, the company's scrambling to find enough silver to pay. This is the problem that's been giving every British merchant heartburn. Britain has developed an absolute obsession with Chinese goods. Tea especially, but also silk and porcelain. The Chinese, meanwhile, have zero interest in anything Britain produces. You know what the numbers are now? Thomas asks, pouring you a cup of Chinese tea. 7 million pounds of tea. That's how much Britain imported last year. 7 million. And how much did we sell to the Chinese? You stare into your teacup. Not enough. Not enough is right, Thomas scoffs. They don't want our wool, they don't want our cotton, they sure as hell don't want our food. All they'll take is silver, and silver is exactly what Britain is running out of. Let me paint you a picture of what's happening here. Imagine you love shopping at one particular store. You go there every week and buy everything. Your food, your clothes, your furniture. But this store won't accept your credit cards or checks. They only take gold coins. So week after week, you empty your safe, handing over more gold coins. Eventually, you're going to run out, right? That's Britain's problem with China, and it's getting worse. In your lifetime, you've watched as Britain transformed into the most powerful nation on earth. The Industrial Revolution has filled British cities with factories and smoke. The middle class is growing, and they all want the same thing: tea. The British East India Company has held a monopoly on this trade for years, but even they can't solve the basic math problem. Britain wants more Chinese goods than China wants British goods. So, Thomas says, lowering his voice conspiratorially, have you considered the other option? You know what he means immediately. Opium. Opium isn't new in China. It's been used medicinally for centuries. But the recreational smoking of opium, that's relatively new and it's spreading like wildfire. And conveniently enough, Britain controls India, where opium poppies grow beautifully. It's technically illegal, you mutter, glancing around the deck. Thomas laughs. So is breathing Chinese air without the emperor's permission. Look, everyone's doing it. We buy opium in India, sell it to Chinese smugglers here, then use that silver to buy tea. The company gets its tea, Britain keeps its silver, and we make a fortune in between. He's not wrong. Despite the Chinese emperor's official ban on opium in 1796, by the 1820s, opium has become Britain's unofficial solution to its trade problem, and it's working. The trade deficit is reversing. "Have you seen an opium den yet?" Thomas asks. You shake your head. "Come on then," he says, heading toward the ship's boat. "Educational purposes only." The trip to shore in the small rowboat takes about 20 minutes. The water of the Pearl River is brown and clouded with waste from the thousands of boats and the city itself, not exactly the crystal clear waters of vacation brochures. Canton sprawls before you, a city of over 1 million people crammed into narrow streets and alleys, but you won't be seeing much of it. As a foreign devil, or fan gui as the Chinese call you, you're restricted to the small trading area near the waterfront. "This way," Thomas says, leading you through the narrow streets of the foreign quarter. You pass other Europeans in Western dress, Chinese merchants in traditional robes, and street vendors selling steaming bowls of congee and dumplings. The smell hits you first, a sickly sweet aroma that reminds you vaguely of burning sugar and something more medicinal. Thomas ducks down an alleyway and knocks 3 times on a nondescript door. It opens just enough to reveal a pair of suspicious eyes. Thomas mutters something in pidgin Chinese, and the door swings open. Inside, the room is dimly lit and hazy with smoke. On simple wooden platforms lie perhaps a dozen Chinese men, each with a long pipe, their eyes glazed over in various states of intoxication. "Jesus," you whisper. "British entrepreneurship at its finest," Thomas says with a smirk. "From India to China to Britain's teacups, the perfect triangle." You're watching the destruction of lives in real time. Some of these men look like they haven't moved in days. Their skin is sallow, their bodies thin. They get addicted fast, Thomas explains, speaking as if discussing the weather. Once they start, they need more and more. Good for business, obviously. "How much is coming in now?" you ask. "About 4,500 chests per year. Each chest holds around 140 pounds of opium." Do the math. That's over 600,000 pounds of opium pouring into China annually and growing. The Chinese government is trying to stop it, Thomas continues as you leave the den, the sweet smoke clinging to your clothes. But their own officials are getting rich off bribes. Hard to stop something when the people enforcing the ban are taking payoffs to look the other way. Back in the foreign quarter, you pass the offices of Jardine, Matheson & Co., one of the largest British trading firms. They've built a fortune on opium. Their ships sail from India laden with the drug, transfer it to smaller vessels outside Chinese waters, then Chinese smugglers bring it ashore at night. The emperor can ban it all he wants, Thomas says, but as long as Chinese people want to smoke it and Chinese officials want bribes to ignore it, the trade will continue. You stop at a tea house where several British merchants are gathered around a table, arguing heatedly. The company's monopoly is ending next year, one says. Parliament's opening the China trade to everyone. About bloody time, another replies. The East India Company's had their chance. Let the rest of us have a go. This is big news. Since 1600, the British East India Company has had a stranglehold on trade with the East. Its monopoly made it effectively a state within a state with its own army and territories. But times are changing. The idea of free trade is taking hold in Britain, and monopolies are falling out of favour. What none of you realize yet is how this change will accelerate events. With the company's monopoly gone, more British merchants will flood into China, all competing for profits, and many will turn to the one commodity guaranteed to make money: opium. Mark my... The Chinese will eventually crack down for real. Then what? Will Britain protect our interests? It's a question that hangs in the air. Britain, flexing the naval muscle of its growing empire, has never been shy about using force to protect trade. But war with China, the very idea seems absurd. China is ancient, vast, populous, the celestial empire, as they call themselves, viewing their emperor as ruling all under heaven. They won't touch us, Thomas says confidently. They need our trade too much. He's wrong, but you won't know that for a few more years. As the sun begins to set, you return to the ship. From the deck, Canton glows with lantern light. It's beautiful in its way, this ancient city on the edge of an empire that considers itself the center of the world. What you're witnessing, though you don't fully realize it yet, is the collision of two worlds. On one side is China, ancient, proud, self-sufficient, but increasingly corrupt and stagnant. On the other is Britain, industrializing, expansionist, hungry for markets, and absolutely convinced of its own superiority. And bridging these worlds is opium, a drug that's slowly poisoning one society while enriching the other. You sleep uneasily that night, the sweet smell of the opium den still lingering in your nostrils. In your dreams, you see those glazed eyes staring back at you, silently asking what right you have to profit from their destruction. But business is business, and by the light of the next morning, such moral qualms seem distant and impractical. Over the next few years, you watch the trade grow. After the East India Company loses its monopoly in 1833, private merchants flood into Canton. Competition drives innovation, faster ships, better smuggling techniques, more efficient networks. The Chinese response is inconsistent at best. Some officials take bribes and look the other way. Others make a show of cracking down, only to release seized opium back to smugglers for a price. It's a system built on corruption and denial. By 1836, opium imports have more than tripled from when you first arrived, reaching 30,000 chests annually. That's over 4 million pounds of opium. The numbers don't lie, Thomas tells you one evening as you review the accounts. He's gotten richer, bought his own ship, expanded his operations. 20 years ago, China had a massive trade surplus with Britain. Now, we've reversed it. They're hemorrhaging silver. You can see it in the exchange rates. The Chinese unit of silver, the tael, has become more valuable as silver grows scarcer in China. Basic economics. They can't ignore it forever, you say. Thomas shrugs. Maybe not. But what can they do? Ban it harder? The answer comes in 1839, and it's not what any of you expected. The Emperor Daoguang, increasingly alarmed by the spread of opium addiction and the drain of silver from his country, decides enough is enough. He appoints a special commissioner named Lin Zexu with a single mission: end the opium trade once and for all. Commissioner Lin arrives in Canton in March 1839, and he's not playing around. This Lin fellow means business, Thomas says, bursting into your quarters one morning. He's arrested over 1,700 Chinese dealers already, made the local magistrate hand over his own son for punishment. Lin doesn't stop with Chinese dealers. He turns his attention to the source, the foreign merchants who bring opium to China's shores. In a bold move, he writes directly to Queen Victoria herself. Your Majesty, Thomas reads aloud from a translated copy circulating among the merchants. How can you let your subjects bring such harmful things to another country? Your nation makes laws against opium. Why would you then sell it to us? It's a fair question. Opium is strictly controlled back in Britain. Laudanum, opium dissolved in alcohol, is available as medicine, but the pure opium being sold to China would could never be permitted for recreational use at home. But Lin's letter never reaches the Queen, and even if it had, British trade interests would likely have prevailed over moral considerations. Commissioner Lin escalates. He demands that all foreign merchants surrender their opium stocks for destruction. When they refuse, he blockades the foreign quarter, cutting off food and supplies. He's trapping us like rats, Thomas fumes. No one in, no one out, until we hand over the opium. The British Superintendent of Trade, Charles Elliot, finds himself in an impossible position. He orders the merchants to surrender their opium, promising they'll be compensated by the British government. Reluctantly, they comply. Over the next few weeks, you watch from your ship as thousands of chests of opium are surrendered to Lin's forces. The value is staggering. Millions of pounds worth of opium, the product of countless acres of Indian poppy fields and years of trade. Lin's men take the opium to a beach outside Canton. There they dig enormous trenches, fill them with the drug, add salt and lime, then flush the mixture out to sea with water. It takes weeks to destroy it all. 20,000 chests, Thomas says quietly as you watch from a distance. Over 2 million pounds of opium. Gone. The destruction of the opium should have been the end of it. Lin had eliminated the immediate supply and sent a clear message. But there's a problem. The British merchants, yourself included, still want to be paid for that opium, and not by the British government, by the Chinese. It was their government that took our property, as one merchant puts it. They should pay for it. Commissioner Lin, however, sees things differently. In his view, he's confiscated contraband, illegal goods that shouldn't have been in China in the first place. The very idea that China should pay compensation for destroying an illegal drug being smuggled into the country seems absurd to him. This impasse might have remained a commercial dispute, but events are about to push it toward war. One hot night in July 1839, a group of drunken British and American sailors row ashore to a village outside Canton. An argument breaks out with the locals. In the scuffle, a Chinese man named Lin Waxi is killed. Commissioner Lin demands the sailors be handed over for trial under Chinese law. Named some see, could mean execution. They'll behead them all, Thomas exclaims when the news spreads through the merchant community. The British refuse to hand over their citizens to the Chinese legal system. Instead, the sailors are tried in a British court, receiving what the Chinese view as a laughably light sentence. Lin, furious at this defiance, takes drastic action. He orders all Chinese servants to leave the foreign quarter and forbids the sale of food to the British. He's trying to starve us out, Thomas says grimly, forces our hand. With tensions escalating daily, British ships fire on Chinese war junks in what will later be called the Battle of Kowloon, the first military engagement of what's about to become the First Opium War. You stand on the deck of your ship, watching the smoke rise from the battle in the distance. This trade dispute over drugs has just become something much larger, a clash between empires with vastly different worldviews and power dynamics. And you, along with every other merchant in Canton, are caught in the middle of what will become one of the most consequential conflicts of the century. War, Thomas says quietly beside you, over opium. Who would have thought? But of course, it's about more than just opium. It's about sovereignty, trade rights, diplomatic equality, all the complex issues that arise when two powerful civilizations collide. And as night falls over Canton, neither you nor anyone else can predict just how dramatically this war will reshape China, Britain, and the balance of power in Asia for the next century. The news arrives on your desk like a death sentence. 23 more cases yesterday, High Magistrate, your assistant says quietly, placing the report before you. 3 dead from overdose. 1 entire family sold their ancestral home for opium money. You rub your temples, feeling the weight of your official hat, the symbol of your rank in the Qing bureaucracy. Outside your window, Canton continues its business in the pale morning light, the same Canton you've sworn to protect as a regional magistrate. The year is 1838 and you're drowning in reports of opium. What began as a trickle has become a flood that threatens to sweep away the very foundations of Chinese society. Any more seizures? You ask. Your assistant shakes his head. The smugglers are getting smarter. They're bribing the Coast Guard now. Of course they are. The corruption spreads as fast as the addiction itself. You rise from your desk and walk to the window. From here you can see the foreign quarter, the 13 factories where the British, Americans and other foreigners conduct their business. Beyond that, the Pearl River, crowded with ships from around the world. It wasn't always like this. You remember when foreign trade was manageable, controlled through the Kohong, the guild of Chinese merchants authorized to deal with foreigners. The system worked for centuries. Foreigners stayed in their designated area, followed Chinese laws, and trade benefited everyone. But opium changed everything. Another report from Fujian province. Your assistant continues, handing you another scroll. The governor estimates 1 in 4 adult males now smokes opium. 1 in 4. The number stuns you. In some coastal villages, it's even worse. Entire male populations addicted, unable to work, spending every copper coin on the drug. And the silver, your assistant's expression darkens, continuing to flow out. Exchange rates are rising weekly. This might be the most dangerous aspect of all. For centuries, China's economy has run on silver. Now, so much silver is leaving the country to pay for opium that the entire economic system is under threat. You've seen the effects firsthand. Last week, you visited a village where farmers couldn't afford seed for the next planting season because the price in silver had risen so high. If this continues, famine isn't far behind. The emperor is aware, you ask? Very. There are rumors he's appointing a special commissioner. You've heard these rumors too. Emperor Daoguang is known to be deeply troubled by the opium crisis. Unlike some of his predecessors who lived in blissful isolation in the Forbidden City, Daoguang seems to understand the existential threat opium poses. Later that day, you attend a meeting of local officials at the governor's compound. The mood is grim. One after another, officials report on the spread of opium addiction in their districts. My Coast Guard seized 3 small boats last week, says a maritime official. Over 200 pounds of opium bound for inland distribution. That's nothing, scoffs another. For every boat you catch, 20 slip through. An older official speaks up. In my 50 years of service, I've never seen a threat like this. The barbarians are waging war on us without firing a shot. There's murmured agreement around the table. You notice some officials shifting uncomfortably. Those who you suspect are taking bribes from smugglers. What do we do? Someone finally asks. We've banned it repeatedly. The emperor's decrees mean nothing if we cannot enforce them. The governor, a thin man with a wispy beard, looks around the table. I've received word from Beijing. The emperor is indeed appointing a special commissioner with extraordinary powers. Lin Zexu, the viceroy of Huguang. A ripple of surprise runs through the room. Lin Zexu is known throughout the bureaucracy as incorruptible, intelligent, and effective, a true Confucian scholar official of the old school. When does he arrive, you ask? Spring, the governor replies, and he comes with the emperor's full authority. As the meeting disperses, an older colleague pulls you aside. You've been to the foreign quarter, haven't you? Speak their devil language? You nod cautiously. Unlike most officials, you've made it a point to learn some English and to understand how the foreigners think. Lin will need men who understand the barbarians, he says. Be ready. The months pass, and the situation only worsens. The streets of Canton now feature a new, haunting sight. Opium addicts in the final stages, their bodies wasted, skin hanging from bones, eyes hollow and desperate. You remember one man particularly, a scholar who once wrote beautiful poetry. Now he lies in an alley, pipe in hand, his talented fingers stained yellow, his mind lost in opium dreams. For him, the Middle Kingdom has already fallen. Spring arrives with peach blossoms and a flurry of activity. Commissioner Lin enters Canton with all the ceremony befitting his rank, drums, banners, and a procession of guards and officials stretching half a mile. You're summoned to his temporary residence the very next day. Lin Zexu is not what you expected. In place of an imposing figure, you find a slight, scholarly man with bright, intelligent eyes that seem to look straight through you. You speak the barbarian tongue? He asks without preamble. Some, Excellency. Enough to communicate. Lin nods, gesturing to a chair. Tell me what you've observed. For the next hour, you detail everything you've seen of the opium trade, the smuggling networks, the corruption, the addiction, the economic damage. Lin listens intently, occasionally making notes with a brush. When you finish, he sits in silence for a long moment. The Emperor has given me a clear mandate, he finally says. End the opium trade by any means necessary. The steel in his voice leaves no doubt that he means exactly what he says. I will need men I can trust, he continues. Men who cannot be bought. Will you serve directly under me? It's a dangerous assignment. You'll make powerful enemies among corrupt officials and opium merchants. But you bow your head anyway. It would be my honor, Excellency. What follows is a whirlwind of activity. Lin moves with astonishing speed and determination. Within days, he's arrested prominent Chinese opium dealers. Some are executed publicly as a warning, others are sent to exile in the harsh western frontier. But Lin knows the source of the problem lies with the foreign merchants who bring the opium to China's shores. He summons the Hong merchants, the Chinese middlemen who deal with foreigners. You will deliver this command to every foreign factory, he tells them. Surrender all opium in their possession within 3 days. Further, they must sign bonds promising never to bring opium to China again, on penalty of death. The Hong merchants blanch. Excellency, they will refuse. Then they will face the consequences. Later that night, you find Lin at his desk, writing by candlelight. You've been assigned as his liaison to the foreign community, translating his proclamations and reporting their responses. They're in shock, you tell him. The British Superintendent, Elliot, has arrived from Macau to deal with the crisis personally. Lin doesn't look up from his writing. Good. A man of authority. Perhaps he can control his merchants better than his predecessors. You glance at the document he's working on. It's a letter written in formal, elegant Chinese. May I ask what you're writing, Excellency? Lin pauses, setting down his brush. A letter to the Queen of England, Victoria. You can't hide your surprise. Directly to their ruler? Why not? Ruler to ruler. I explain the harm opium does to our people. I appeal to her moral sense. Surely she would not allow such evil to be perpetrated in her own country. Why then permit her subjects to poison ours? The logic is impeccable. But you've studied the British enough to know the letter will never reach Victoria. And even if it did, commercial interests would prevail over moral arguments. But Lin's sincerity moves you. He truly believes reason and virtue will triumph. The deadline passes. As predicted, the foreign merchants refuse to surrender their opium or sign the bonds. Lin's response is immediate and dramatic. No Chinese shall serve the foreign factories, he decrees. No food shall be sold to them. No one shall enter or leave the foreign quarter until they comply. It's an ancient siege tactic applied to trade diplomacy, and remarkably, it works, partly. After 6 weeks of confinement, the British superintendent Elliot capitulates. He orders British merchants to surrender their opium, promising them compensation from the British government. Over the next few days, more than 20,000 chests of opium, £2.6 million of the drug, are handed over to Chinese authorities. You're present at the handover, watching as cart after cart of the dark, sticky substance arrives at the collection point. The British merchants look furious, none more so than William Jardine and James Matheson, whose company is the largest opium importer. "This is theft," Jardine spits when he sees you. "Your government will pay for this. You maintain your composure. Your opium has destroyed countless lives, Mr. Jardine. My government is protecting its people." Jardine's face reddens. This isn't about opium, it's about trade. Free trade, a concept your backward empire can't grasp. The exchange haunts you later. To Jardine, this is just business, impersonal, rational. He doesn't see the hollow-eyed addicts, the families destroyed, the villages emptied of silver. Commissioner Lin is triumphant. At Human, just outside Canton, he oversees the destruction of the seized opium in specially dug trenches. The process takes weeks. Workers mix the opium with salt, lime, and water, then flush the mixture into the sea. The smell is overwhelming, a sickly sweet odour that clings to your clothes and hair. You find yourself retching alongside many of the workers. "A necessary evil," Lin says, standing beside you as another batch is destroyed. "We must cleanse our nation of this poison." But even in this moment of victory, you sense trouble ahead. The British merchants have retreated to Macau, then to ships anchored off the coast. Rumours swirl that Jardine has returned to London to lobby for military intervention. Commissioner Lin, however, believes the matter settled. He's fulfilled the Emperor's command. The opium has been seized and destroyed, and bonds have been signed promising no more will be imported. In the following weeks, Lin continues his campaign. He establishes a naval blockade to search incoming ships. He rewards informants who report smuggling. He punishes corrupt officials who facilitated the trade. One evening, as summer heat hangs heavy over Canton, you join Lin on the veranda of his residence. Below, lanterns illuminate the city as night falls. "The Emperor is pleased," Lin says, sipping his tea. "He has awarded me the title of Grand Secretary. A well-deserved honour, Excellency." Lin studies you for a moment. You look troubled. You hesitate, then decide honesty is best. "I fear the British will not accept this outcome. They've lost millions of dollars worth of opium. Their pride is wounded, and they have the naval power to respond." Lin considers this. "Perhaps, but right is on our side. The moral law of heaven supports our cause." "The British have cannons, Excellency, and steamships." Lin smiles slightly. "You admire their technology." "I fear it," you correct him. "I've seen their ships, their weapons. We have nothing comparable. Numbers are on our side. The Celestial Empire has stood for thousands of years. What are a few barbarian ships against the will of heaven?" You wish you shared his confidence. "But you've studied British military campaigns in India, Burma, and elsewhere. They may be few, but their technological advantage is overwhelming." Later that week, news arrives of an incident that will change everything. Some drunken British and American sailors have killed a Chinese villager named Lin Waxy during a brawl. Commissioner Lin demands the foreigners be handed over for trial under Chinese law. The British refuse, trying the sailors in their own court and imposing light sentences. Lin is furious. They kill one of our people and claim the right to judge the crime themselves. This cannot stand. He escalates again, ordering all Chinese servants to leave the foreign quarter and forbidding food sales to the British. It's a miscalculation. The British ships, now anchored at Hong Kong, respond by attacking Chinese junks in what becomes known as the Battle of Kowloon. The first shots of the Opium War have been fired. That night, as reports of the skirmish reach Canton, you find Lin again at his desk, writing by candlelight. He looks older suddenly, the weight of events pressing down on his shoulders. "What are you writing, Excellency?" "A report to the Emperor. I've requested reinforcements for the coastal defences." You nod, knowing it won't be enough. Not against British warships, but Lin, for all his wisdom, doesn't understand the threat. Few in the imperial court do. China has been the centre of its world for so long that it cannot imagine being truly threatened by a small island nation from the other side of the globe. The British Parliament is discussing war, you tell him, reporting what you've heard from your sources. Jardine is pushing for a military expedition. Lin sets down his brush. For the first time since you've known him, he looks uncertain. Why? We've acted according to our laws. Opium is banned. We seized contraband. What nation would go to war over the right to poison another? It's a reasonable question, but reason has little to do with what's coming. In the months that follow, tension builds along the coast. Small skirmishes break out between Chinese junks and British ships. In Canton, the foreign factories remain empty, trade at a standstill. You continue to serve under Lin, but increasingly you're sending reports rather than receiving instructions. He's been recalled to Beijing to explain the deteriorating situation to the Emperor. Before he leaves, he calls you to his residence one last time. "I failed to understand them," he says quietly. "The barbarians. Their ways are more alien than I knew." It's the closest he'll come to admitting he miscalculated. "You did what was right," you assure him. Perhaps, but right is not always enough. Lin's departure leaves a void in Canton. Other officials, less determined and more corrupt, begin to walk back some of his stricter policies. The opium trade, momentarily disrupted, starts to resume through different channels. Then, in June 1840, nearly a year after the opium destruction, the news you've been dreading arrives. A British fleet has reached Chinese waters. 16 warships, 4 armed steamers, and 28 transports carrying 4,000 troops. The First Opium War has officially begun, though no formal declaration has been made. It's a war unlike any China has faced before. Not a border conflict with nomadic tribes or a dynastic rebellion, but a clash with a technologically superior foreign power driven by commercial interests. As you watch the sun set over Canton that evening, you wonder what Commissioner Lin would say now. Would he still believe in the protection of heaven, the moral supremacy of China's cause? One thing is certain, the Celestial Empire is about to learn a harsh lesson about the changing world order, and the cost will be measured not just in silver, but in sovereignty. The British ships are coming, and they bring with them the dawn of a new era, one in which China will no longer be the centre of its world. The deck of HMS Voyage creaks beneath your boots as you pace back and forth, spyglass in hand. You pause at the rail, scanning the horizon where the Pearl River meets the South China Sea. No movement, no supplies. Day 3 of the standoff. "Anything, Lieutenant?" Captain Smith asks, joining you at the rail. "Nothing, sir." You collapse your spyglass with a sharp click. Not a sampan in sight. It's July 1839, and you're a young lieutenant in Her Majesty's Royal Navy, serving on a 28-gun frigate off the coast of China. 3 days ago, Commissioner Lin ordered all food supplies to British ships cut off. Now your stomach growls in protest, and the mood on board grows darker by the hour. Bloody Chinese, the captain mutters, starving us out over a few crates of opium. You know it's more than a few crates, 20,000 chests destroyed, millions of pounds sterling gone. But right now, your mind is on more immediate concerns, like when you'll eat again. What about Macau, sir, you suggest? The Portuguese might still trade with us. The captain nods grimly. Already sent the cutter. Should be back by nightfall. This wasn't how you imagined your posting to the China station. The Royal Navy has maintained a presence in these waters for years, protecting British trade interests. But what began as a commercial dispute has escalated beyond anything you expected. Hard to believe it's come to this, you say. Over opium. It's not about the opium, lad. The captain's voice takes on the tone he uses when imparting wisdom to junior officers. It's about respect, sovereignty. You can't have Chinese officials dictating terms to subjects of the British Crown. You're not entirely convinced. But you nod anyway. Naval officers don't question their superiors, especially when everyone's hungry and tempers are short. Below deck, the mood is even worse. The sailors crowd in the mess, their usual banter replaced by sullen silence. The cook has stretched the remaining rations as far as possible, but it's not enough. "When are we going to hit back, sir?" asks Midshipman Collins, a boy barely 17 with an eager face that hasn't yet needed a razor. "The men are saying we should just shell Canton and be done with it." "That's not our decision to make," you tell him firmly. "London will decide what happens next." But privately, you wonder. Britain doesn't take humiliation lightly, especially from those it considers inferior. The seizure of the opium, the confinement of British subjects, and now this food blockade. Each is a step toward what feels increasingly inevitable. That evening, the cutter returns from Macau with grim news. The Chinese have pressured the Portuguese to refuse supplies to British ships as well. "We'll need to sail south," the captain announces at the officers' meeting, "Singapore or Manila for provisions. We can't hold station here without food." It's a reluctant retreat, however temporary, and everyone feels it. The mighty Royal Navy forced to abandon its post because it can't secure a loaf of bread or a side of beef. The humiliation burns. As you prepare to depart, news arrives by a merchant ship. Some British sailors went ashore near Kowloon and got into a drunken brawl with locals. A Chinese man named Lin Wakesey was killed. "Commissioner Lin is demanding we hand over the culprits for execution," your captain informs the officers. Superintendent Elliot has refused, of course, says they'll be tried under British law. "And will they?" asks the ship's surgeon, a cynical Scotsman with little patience for diplomatic niceties. The captain's expression tells you everything. The sailors will receive token punishments at most. No British subject will hang for the death of a Chinese villager, no matter the circumstances. This is how empires operate, you're learning. Different rules for different people. The strong dictate terms to the weak. It's been this way since Rome, perhaps since the beginning of civilization. You're a naval officer, not a politician or a philosopher. Your job is to follow order and protect British interests. But sometimes, in the quiet hours of your watch, you wonder about the justice of it all. 2 days later, you're anchored near Hong Kong, an island the British have begun using as a makeshift base. Superintendent Elliot has established temporary headquarters here, away from Canton's restrictions. A summons arrives for your captain. All ship commanders are to report to Elliot immediately. When he returns hours later, his expression is thunderous. "We're moving back to the Pearl River," he announces. "Lin has cut off all supplies to British nationals. Elliot's demanding the Chinese government change its position or face consequences." "We're going to fight?" you ask, trying to keep the surprise from your voice. "We're going to show force," the captain corrects. HMS Volage and Hyacinth will proceed to Chwenpi, near the mouth of the Pearl River. If Chinese war junks try to stop us, we have authorization to engage. Just like that, the line has been crossed. What was a trade dispute, then a diplomatic crisis, now verges on military conflict. The next morning dawns misty and still as your ships approach Chwenpi. Through your spyglass, you can make out the shapes of Chinese war junks. At least 15 of them, forming a blockade across the river. "Beat to quarters," the captain orders, his voice unnaturally calm. The drum sounds, and the ship transforms into a hive of disciplined activity. Gun crews take position, powder monkeys stand ready, marines line the rails with muskets loaded. Run up the signal, disperse or be fired upon, the captain commands. Flags rise up the mast, colourful against the grey sky. On the Chinese junks, you see activity but no movement away from their position. "They're not budging, sir," you report. "Very well." The captain takes a deep breath. Fire a warning shot across their bow. The forward gun roars to life, sending a ball splashing into the water just ahead of the lead junk. The sound echoes across the water, hanging in the air like a question. The answer comes minutes later. A puff of smoke from the Chinese flagship, then the distant boom of a cannon. Their shot falls well short, sending up a plume of water halfway between your vessels. "So that's how it is," the captain says quietly. Then, louder, "Target the lead vessel. Fire as you bear." The gun crews leap into action. The ship's side erupts in flame and smoke as the cannons discharge in sequence. Through the haze, you see several shots strike the lead junk. Wood splinters fly. Men dive overboard. What happens next unfolds with surreal clarity. The Chinese ships advance, firing their cannons with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Your ships respond with disciplined broadsides. The difference in firepower and training is immediately apparent. Within 30 minutes, 4 Chinese junks are sinking and 3 more heavily damaged. The remainder scatter, retreating upriver in disarray. Not one British sailor is killed, though 2 suffer minor wounds from splinters. It's not a battle so much as a slaughter. The Chinese vessels, while numerous, are hopelessly outclassed by European naval technology and tactics. Their wooden junks with minimal cannon might as well be from another century compared to your ship. "Cease fire," the captain orders as the last Chinese ship disappears around a bend in the river. "Make a count of ammunition expended and damage sustained." You go about your duties mechanically, still processing what you've witnessed. Your first naval engagement, your first time seeing men die in combat. It should feel momentous, but instead it feels hollow, like swatting flies. "Not much of a fight, was it?" Midshipman Collins says, appearing at your side. His earlier eagerness has been replaced by something more somber. "No," you agree, "not much of a fight at all." This minor skirmish, what will later be called the Battle of Chwenpi or Kowloon, is hardly worthy of the name, but you sense its significance. The first exchange of fire between British and Chinese forces, a line crossed that cannot be uncrossed. That evening, you write in your journal, trying to make sense of the day's events. You've been in the Navy since you were 12, raised on stories of Nelson and Trafalgar. You joined to fight the enemies of Britain, to protect commerce and expand the empire. But this doesn't feel like those glorious tales. "Lieutenant," the captain's steward interrupts your writing. Captain requests your presence in his cabin. You find Captain Smith studying charts, a glass of port at his elbow. He looks up as you enter. "Ah, there you are. Take a seat." He pushes the port toward you. "Thoughts on today?" You choose your words carefully. "We demonstrated our superiority, sir, but I doubt it will change their position." "Precisely." He taps the chart. "This was just the beginning. Superintendent Elliot has dispatched messengers to India. Governor-General Auckland will send reinforcements." We're preparing for war then. The captain shrugs. London hasn't declared anything yet, but yes, that's where this is headed. The Chinese need to learn they can't treat British subjects this way. Over the next few months, a strange limbo descends. Most British merchants retreat to Macau or Manila. Trade grinds to a halt. Occasional skirmishes break out between Chinese forces and British ships, but no major engagements. You patrol the waters off Hong Kong, waiting for news from London. The weather turns cooler as autumn approaches, bringing relief from the oppressive summer heat. Still, no orders come. Then, in January 1840, a ship arrives from England bearing dispatches. You're present in Superintendent Elliott's makeshift office when the captain brings them. Parliament has decided, Elliott announces after reading through the papers. They've approved military action against China. No one seems surprised. The debate had been fierce in London, with some MPs arguing against war. They questioned the morality of fighting to protect an illegal drug trade, but commercial interests prevailed, bolstered by national pride. What forces can we expect? Your captain asks. 16 warships, 4 armed steamers, 28 transports, Elliott reads. 4,000 troops initially. They'll depart from India within weeks. It's a substantial force, especially for a conflict half a world away from Britain. The Chinese, with their antiquated junks and limited cannon, won't stand a chance. In the following weeks, British newspapers arrive carrying reports of the parliamentary debates. You read them with interest, noting how the narrative has shifted. The opium, the actual cause of the conflict, is rarely mentioned. Instead, the focus is on Chinese insults to British dignity, the confinement of British subjects, the uncivilized behaviour of Commissioner Lin. Some papers publish lurid stories of Chinese cruelty toward foreigners, many exaggerated or entirely fabricated. Political cartoons depict Chinese officials as backward barbarians. Public opinion, initially divided, swings firmly behind military action. This is how wars begin, you realize, not just with cannons, but with words, with stories told to justify actions already decided upon. Spring arrives, and with it the British Expeditionary Force. The harbour at Hong Kong transforms almost overnight, filling with warships, transports and supply vessels. Military discipline replaces the relative casualness of the naval squadron. You watch from the deck of HMS Volage as troops disembark. Regiments from the British Army and sepoys from the East India Company forces. Their red coats and white crossbelts stand in stark contrast to the blue waters of the harbour. "Impressive, isn't it?" says a voice beside you. You turn to find a civilian gentleman observing the proceedings. Indeed, you agree. And you are? Charles Gutzlaff. He extends his hand. Interpreter and missionary. You've heard of Gutzlaff, one of the few Westerners fluent in Chinese, known for distributing Christian literature along the coast while gathering intelligence on Chinese defences. "They don't stand a chance," Gutzlaff says, nodding toward the mainland. "I've seen their forts, their troops, antiquated. The Qing military has been in decline for a century. You don't sound troubled by the prospect of war," you observe. Gutzlaff smiles thinly. "This war, however regrettable its cause, will open China to free trade and to the gospel. Both are sorely needed here." It's a common sentiment among the foreigners in China that forcing open the country is ultimately for China's own good, that free trade and Christianity will civilize this ancient empire. You're saved from responding by the approach of your captain, who informs you that Volage is to join the first offensive operation, the capture of Chusan Island as a forward base. As preparations continue, you're transferred to HMS Nemesis, one of the new iron-hulled steam vessels that have just arrived. The Nemesis represents the cutting edge of naval technology: iron hull, steam-powered paddle wheels, and pivot guns capable of firing explosive shells rather than just solid shot. She only draws 5 feet of water, the chief engineer tells you proudly as he shows you around, can sail right up the shallow Chinese rivers where no ship of the line could follow, and those paddle wheels mean we don't need favourable winds. We make our own way. The technological gap between Britain and China, already wide, just grew wider. In June 1840, the expedition finally gets underway. The plan is to blockade the Pearl River, seize Chusan Island near Ningbo, then move north to apply pressure at Tianjin, the port serving Beijing. The goal is to force the emperor to negotiate on British terms. As HMS Nemesis steams north along the Chinese coast, you stand on the deck watching the shoreline slide by. Fishing villages, terraced fields, ancient pagodas, China unfolds before you like a painted scroll. It's beautiful, this land you've come to conquer. You think of the Chinese war junks sinking at Chwempi, the sailors swimming desperately for shore. You think of the opium dens in Canton, men wasting away on their platforms. You think of the British merchants counting their profits in Hong Kong. Having second thoughts, Lieutenant? Asks the ship's commander, catching your expression. Just thinking about what we're doing here, sir. He nods, understanding your meaning. Look at it this way. The sooner we show our strength, the sooner they'll come to terms, less bloodshed in the long run. It's a comforting rationalization, and perhaps it's even true. But as the steam engines throb beneath your feet, propelling you inexorably north toward war, you can't help wondering what will be unleashed once the full might of the British Empire is brought to bear on the Celestial Kingdom. The technological disparity isn't just a military advantage, it's a chasm between worlds. Two civilizations, each convinced of its superiority, are about to collide, and when they do, the world will never be the same. As night falls, watch the coast disappear into darkness. Somewhere out there, Chinese forces are preparing their defenses, unaware of just how outmatched they truly are. The First Opium War is about to begin in earnest, and you're sailing straight into the heart of it. The walls of Dinghai Fortress have stood for centuries. You've served as a garrison officer here for 12 years, watching traders come and go from the harbour below. The fortress has never fallen, not to pirates, not to rebels, not to anyone, until today. They're coming again? Your lieutenant points to the harbour where British warships are positioning themselves, black smoke billowing from the strange vessels that move without sails. It's July 5th, 1840, and you're a commander in the Qing military, responsible for defending Dinghai, the main port of Chusan Island. Yesterday, the British fleet appeared on the horizon, more ships than you've ever seen at once. This morning, they sent an envoy demanding surrender. You refused. Of course. The Emperor would accept nothing less. How many cannon do we have operational? You ask, surveying the walls. 36, Commander. But the lieutenant hesitates. Speak freely. They won't reach. I watched yesterday. Their ships can fire from beyond our range. You've noticed this too. The foreigners' vessels can strike your walls while staying safely in deep water, untouchable by your cannon. It's like fighting an opponent with a spear when you only have a knife. Ready the men anyway, and send riders to the villages. All civilians should retreat inland. As your lieutenant hurries off, you walk along the ramparts, checking the ancient cannon. Most are iron, cast centuries ago. Some are bronze, ornately decorated with dragons and imperial symbols. All are mounted on wooden carriages that haven't been properly maintained in decades. The gunpowder is old too, stored improperly and likely degraded. You've requested replacements for years, but the imperial bureaucracy moves slowly, and coastal defences haven't been a priority. The Qing Empire hasn't faced a serious naval threat in generations until now. From the highest point of the fortress, you watch the British ship maneuver with precision. Their discipline is impressive. Each vessel knows its place, its role. You've studied military texts all your life, the strategies of ancient generals, but nothing has prepared you for this. Soldier runs up, breathless. The strange ship, the one that moves without sails, it's approaching the harbour. You raise your spyglass. The ship in question is unlike anything you've seen before. No billowing sails, just two large wheels on either side churning the water, propelling it forward regardless of wind or tide. Smoke pours from a tall stack amidships. The hull isn't wood, but some dark material. Iron, you've heard. What is its name? You ask the soldier. The locals who trade with foreigners call it Nemesis, a fitting name for what's coming. Before you can issue new orders, a flash erupts from the side of Nemesis. Seconds later, something strikes the wall near you with a terrible crash. Not a solid cannonball, but something that explodes on impact, sending deadly fragments in all directions. Men scream, stone crumbles. Take cover, you shout, but it's too late for some. A dozen of your soldiers lie dead or wounded where the shell hit. Another flash from the ship, another explosion, this time striking an ammunition cache. The secondary explosion is catastrophic, collapsing a section of wall and killing scores instantly. Your cannon finally open fire, but as predicted, the balls fall short, splashing harmlessly into the harbour waters. The range is simply too great. For the next 2 hours, hell rains down on Dinghai Fortress. The British ships methodically reduce your defences to rubble. Your men fight bravely but futilely, manning cannon that cannot reach the enemy, firing muskets that are accurate to 100 paces against ships 500 paces away. By sunset, the fortress that has stood for centuries is a broken shell. A third of your men are dead. Many more are wounded. The survivors look to you, their eyes haunted by the day's slaughter. "What do we do, Commander?" your lieutenant asks. The answer is obvious, if bitter. We retreat. We cannot hold against such weapons. That night, as your remaining forces withdraw from the smoking ruins of Dinghai, British troops land unopposed. By morning, the Union Jack flies over the fortress where imperial banners have hung for generations. You lead your battered contingent inland toward the provincial capital where you'll report this disaster to your superiors. As you march, locals watch from the fields, their faces betraying neither sympathy nor surprise. They've seen which way the wind blows. "How can we fight them?" your lieutenant asks as you make camp that evening. "Their ships are iron. They move without wind. Their cannon fire exploding shells, not solid balls." "We adapt," you say with more confidence than you feel. "We learn. The Empire has faced barbarians before, but even as you say it, you know this is different. These aren't nomadic tribesmen from the steppes who can be bought off or absorbed. These barbarians bring technologies you don't understand, tactics you've never encountered, and an implacable determination to open China on their terms." Word spreads quickly of Dinghai's fall. As you journey to the provincial capital, you hear rumours of other British victories along the coast. Amoy, Ningpo, Canton, the mighty Qing Empire, which has ruled for 2 centuries, seems helpless before these foreign devils. At the capital, you're immediately summoned to the governor's palace. You expect anger, perhaps even punishment for your failure. Instead, you find confusion and fear. "Tell me everything," the governor says. "Leave nothing out. We must understand what we're facing." So you describe the iron ship that moves against the wind and tide, the exploding shells that destroy stone walls, the precision of British gunnery, the discipline of their troops. When you finish, silence hangs over the chamber. "Can we match them?" the governor finally asks. "Not as we are," you admit. "Their weapons, their ships, they're from another world." One of the governor's advisors speaks up. "We have more men, thousands more. We can overwhelm them with numbers." You shake your head. Numbers mean nothing when they can kill 100 men with one exploding shell, when their ships can bombard us from beyond our cannon's reach. "And what do you suggest?" the governor asks. "What can you suggest? You're a military officer, not a diplomat or strategist. You know how to command troops, maintain discipline, manage defenses, but this new kind of warfare, you're as lost as everyone else. We need new weapons," you say finally, "new ships, new tactics. We need to learn what they know." "That would take years," another advisor objects. "We don't have years. They're advancing now." He's right, of course. The British aren't going to politely wait while China modernizes its military. They're here, they're winning, and they want concessions. The governor dismisses the meeting without decisions. As you leave, he asks you to remain behind. "Speak freely," he says when you're alone. "What would you do in my position?" You consider carefully. "Negotiate," you say finally. "Buy time. Learn from them. Then, when we're stronger, reconsider." He nods slowly. A bitter medicine, but perhaps necessary. Later that week, you're reassigned to a new command, a coastal battery near Ningbo, hastily reinforced after news of Ding Hai's fall. As you travel there, you witness the panic spreading through the countryside. Villagers flee inland, fearing the foreign devils and their thunderships. Markets are empty, fields untended. Your new post isn't much better than Ding Hai. Ancient cannon, crumbling walls, untrained troops, but now there's fear in the air too. Your men have heard the stories. They know what happened at Ding Hai. "Will they come here?" a young soldier asks during inspection. "Perhaps," you answer honestly. "If they do, we'll be ready." It's a lie, but a necessary one for morale. You spend the next weeks drilling your men, repairing defences, studying what little intelligence you have about British tactics. You send scouts to observe their ships from a distance. You interrogate merchants who've dealt with foreigners. One evening, a fisherman is brought to your quarters. He's been to Hong Kong, he says, seen the British building what looks like a permanent settlement. "They're not leaving," he tells you. "They're building stone buildings, piers, warehouses. They're bringing in more ships all the time." This confirms your worst fears. The British aren't here for a punitive expedition. They're here to stay. The fisherman has more to tell. "I saw their iron ship close up. Nemesis, they call it. Do you know how it moves?" You shake your head. "Fire and water," he says. "They burn coal to heat water into steam. The steam pushes great pistons that turn the paddle wheels. No sails needed, no oarsmen, just fire and water and iron. It sounds like sorcery, but you've seen it with your own eyes. Ships moving against the wind, belching smoke. The world is changing, and China is being dragged along, ready or not." Days later, a messenger arrives with new orders. You're being transferred again, this time to Canton. The British have returned to the Pearl River, and every experienced officer is needed. "What about my men?" you ask. "Bring the best, leave the rest to defend here." You select 50 of your most reliable troops and depart the next morning. The journey to Canton takes weeks across mountains and rivers through territories increasingly disrupted by the foreign presence. Everywhere you see signs of an empire in crisis, abandoned villages, rowdy deserters, officials fleeing their posts. Canton itself is hardly recognizable when you arrive. Once a bustling trading port, it's now a city under siege. British warships control the approaches. The foreign factories stand empty, their occupants having relocated to Hong Kong. Chinese troops have hastily constructed new defences, but you can see at a glance they won't stand against determined British assault. You report to the new commander, a tough old veteran named Admiral Guan, who's been tasked with defending the Pearl River. He doesn't waste time on pleasantries. "You've faced their ships before," he says. "Tell me how we stop them." "We don't," you reply bluntly. "Not with what we have. Their nemesis can sail in shallow water where our junks can't pursue. Their cannon outrange ours. Their shells explode on impact." Admiral Guan's expression darkens. "Then what do you propose? Surrender? Or adaptation? New tactics? We can't match them ship for ship, but perhaps we can use the river against them. Barriers, chains, fire rafts. It's desperation, and you both know it, but it's something, a plan, however slim its chances." For the next few days you work with the Admiral to prepare Canton's defences. Chain booms are stretched across the river at narrow points, fire rafts are constructed, basically floating platforms loaded with combustibles designed to be set ablaze and directed at enemy ships. Ancient cannon are repositioned for maximum effect. Then word comes that Nemesis is approaching, leading a flotilla of British warships up the Pearl River. "They're testing our defences," Admiral Guan says, "probing for weakness. You take position at the main battery overlooking the river. Through your spyglass you watch Nemesis approach the first chain boom. The iron ship slows, examining the obstacle. Then, methodically, it begins firing exploding shells at the shore points where the chains are anchored. Within an hour, the chains hang loose in the water. Nemesis proceeds upriver. At the second defensive line, you've prepared fire rafts. As Nemesis approaches, these are set alight and pushed into the current. For a moment, it seems to work. The British ships pause, wary of the floating infernos drifting toward them. Then Nemesis demonstrates another advantage, maneuverability. Its paddle wheels reverse, holding position against the current, while small boats from the other ships attach grappling hooks to the fire rafts and tow them safely to shore, where they burn harmlessly. Your heart sinks. Every defensive measure neutralized, every advantage countered. By evening, the British flotilla has pushed to within sight of Canton itself. They anchor just beyond range of the city's heaviest cannon and launch several small shells, not at the defences, but into the heart of the city. It's a demonstration, a warning of what they could do. In the War Council that night, Admiral Guan is grim. They could reduce Canton to rubble if they wished. "Why haven't they?" asks another officer. "They don't want to destroy the city," you realise. "They want to trade with it. They want access to our markets, our tea, our silk. A ruined city can't provide that. It's small comfort. The British are showing restraint, not from mercy but from commercial interest." The next morning, a boat under flag of truce approaches from the British fleet. It carries a message: surrender the city or face bombardment. Admiral Guan has no choice. With the Emperor far away in Beijing and provincial authorities in disarray, he makes the decision himself. Canton will be handed over to British control. What happens now, you ask as you watch British Marines disembark at the waterfront. Now we lose, the Admiral says bitterly. But perhaps not forever. The transition is surprisingly orderly. British troops occupy key positions but make no attempt to administer the city themselves. Instead, they install a compliant Chinese merchant as governor, someone who will ensure British trade interests are protected. Within days, trade resumes. Tea and silk flow out to foreign ships. manufactured goods flow in, and opium, the original cause of this conflict, moves openly now, no longer smuggled but traded legally under British protection. You're assigned as liaison between Chinese authorities and British forces, a humiliating position, but one that gives you unique insight into the conquerors. You learn their language, study their technology, observe their methods. One British officer, a Lieutenant Wilson, seems genuinely interested in China. Unlike many of his colleagues who openly despise the heathens, Wilson asks thoughtful questions about Chinese culture, history, and technology. Why did China fall behind? He asks one evening as you share tea in what was once a Chinese government building, now a British officer's mess. Behind in what? You counter. Ships, guns, steam power. You invented gunpowder, for God's sake. The compass, too. Yet now your weapons are centuries behind ours. It's a question that has haunted you since Dinghai. Perhaps we believed we were already perfect, you suggest. The Middle Kingdom, centre of civilization. Why improve what isn't broken? Wilson nods thoughtfully. Complacency, the most dangerous enemy. And you, British, are you not complacent in your victory? He laughs. Hardly. Even now, our engineers are designing better ships, better guns. Progress never stops. That's the difference, you realize. Not just technology, but the attitude toward it, the constant drive to improve, to innovate, to surpass what came before. Meanwhile, the war continues elsewhere. Hong Kong has been formally claimed as a British colony. Other treaty ports are being established along the coast. Chinese resistance is crumbling everywhere in the face of overwhelming technological superiority. The governor of Canton summons you one day, in early 1842. I'm sending you to Hong Kong, he says. Observe what the British are building there. Learn everything you can about their plans. So, you find yourself on a small Chinese junk sailing into Hong Kong harbour, now firmly under British control. What you see shocks you. In less than 2 years, the British have transformed a sleepy fishing village into the beginnings of a major port. Stone buildings rise along the waterfront. Warehouses, offices, residences. Piers extend into deep water, accommodating the largest ships. Most impressive is the naval yard they're constructing. Here, British ships can be repaired and resupplied far from home. It's not just a trading post, it's a permanent military base in the heart of Chinese waters. As you walk through the streets of this new Hong Kong, you overhear British merchants discussing the war's progress. They speak openly, not realizing you understand their language. The campaign along the Yangtze is going splendidly, one says. Took Zhenjiang last week. Shanghai will fall any day now. Heard they're pushing all the way to Nanking, his companion replies. Bring the war to the emperor's doorstep. Make him negotiate for real. It's worse than you feared. The British aren't just fighting for Canton or even for the treaty ports. They're striking at the heart of China, navigating the mighty Yangtze River itself, China's great artery. That evening, in a harbourside tavern, you encounter Lieutenant Wilson again. He's surprised to see you, but invites you to join him. Here to spy on us? He asks bluntly, though his tone remains friendly. To observe, you correct him, as you observed our defences before attacking. He concedes the point with a nod. Fair enough. Though I doubt your reports will change the outcome now. The war is effectively over. Your emperor just hasn't admitted it yet. You can't argue. From everything you've heard, the British advance seems unstoppable. Their steamships navigate rivers once thought impassable to large vessels. Their troops outfight imperial forces at every turn. What will you take from us? You ask quietly. Wilson considers this. Trade access mainly. The right for our merchants to operate in more ports, legal protection for British subjects in China, perhaps some territory like Hong Kong. And opium? Will you force us to legalise it? He has the grace to look uncomfortable. I expect so, though between us I find that part distasteful. Yet you fight for it. I fight because those are my orders, Wilson says. As would you. He's right, of course. Soldiers follow orders. They don't make policy. As you prepare to return to Canton the next day, you take one last look at Hong Kong from the departing junk. In just 2 years, the British have created something new here. Not Chinese, not fully British either, but something in between, a bridgehead between East and West. You wonder what China will look like in another 2 years, or 20. The world is changing faster than anyone could have imagined, and the Celestial Empire, for all its ancient glory, is being dragged into a future it never chose. The iron ships that brought this war will bring much more before they're done. For better or worse, China will never be the same again. The boat rocks gently beneath you as it makes its way up the Yangtze. Beyond the silk curtains of your cabin, you can hear the steady splash of oars. Occasionally, a soldier calls out, his voice tense. You are Chishan, a high-ranking official of the Qing Empire, now on the most difficult mission of your career. It's August 1842, and you're travelling to meet the British forces advancing up the Yangtze River. Your task? Negotiate peace before they reach Nanking, the ancient southern capital, just 250 miles from the emperor himself in Beijing. The shame of it burns in your stomach like bad wine. You, a scholar official from one of China's oldest families, sent to beg barbarians for mercy. My lord, your assistant parts the curtain. The scouts report British ships ahead, iron ships. You nod, adjusting your official hat and straightening your robes. Appearances matter, especially in defeat. How many? 3 iron ships leading, many wooden vessels behind. They've anchored near Nanking's outer defences. You've heard about these iron monsters, Nemesis and her sister ships, impervious to Chinese cannon, able to move against wind and tide, breathing smoke and fire like dragons from ancient legends. Prepare the white flag, you order, and my official seals. As your boat approaches the British fleet, you take measure of what you're facing. The iron ships are indeed fearsome, black hulls rising from the water, smoke belching from tall stacks. Around them cluster traditional sailing vessels, but even these are larger and more powerfully armed than anything in China's navy. A small launch meets you midway. You transfer to it with your assistants and interpreters, maintaining dignity despite the awkwardness of boarding the tiny craft in your formal robes. The British ship is even more impressive up close. HMS Cornwallis, you're told, the flagship. As you climb the accommodation ladder, you're greeted by an honour guard of Marines in red coats and an officer who introduces himself as Captain Richards. Sir Henry Pottinger is expecting you, he says, leading you across a deck crowded with cannon and busy sailors. You've heard of Pottinger, the new British plenipotentiary sent to replace Charles Elliot, who was deemed too soft in his dealings with China. Pottinger has a reputation for ruthlessness. The captain leads you to the great cabin at the stern. Inside, several British officials sit around a large table covered with maps and documents. At the head sits a stocky man with a weathered face and calculating eyes. His Excellency Chishan, Imperial Commissioner, announces your interpreter. Sir Henry Pottinger rises, offering a slight bow, less than your rank deserves, but more than you expected. Commissioner, he says. Please, be seated. We have much to discuss. You take your place at the table, acutely aware that this meeting is occurring on their ship, not on Chinese soil, a symbolic concession before negotiations even begin. I bring greetings from the Emperor, you say formally, and authority to discuss terms of reconciliation between our great nations. Pottinger's expression doesn't change. Let us be direct, Commissioner. Your Emperor's forces have been defeated at every turn. We control the coast from Canton to Shanghai. Our fleet sits within striking distance of Nanking. We could reduce the southern capital to rubble by nightfall. The threat hangs in the air. You know it's not an idle one. Reports have reached Beijing of the British bombardment of other cities, precise, devastating, unstoppable. The Emperor desires peace, you acknowledge, but peace with honour. Honour is a luxury for the victorious, Pottinger replies, but I am not here to humiliate China unnecessarily. I have specific terms that will satisfy my government. He slides a document across the table. It's written in both English and Chinese, the latter translated badly, with numerous errors, but the meaning is clear enough. As you read, your heart sinks. The demands are even worse than you feared. Cession of Hong Kong Island, payment of $6 million silver as war reparations, opening of 5 ports to British residents and trade, establishment of fixed tariffs on imports and exports. Legal equality between British and Chinese officials. These terms are severe, you say carefully. They are non-negotiable, Pottinger responds, though I'm open to discussing implementation details. You think of your instructions from the Emperor. You're authorized to cede Hong Kong, a small, relatively unimportant island. You can agree to open some ports and pay some reparations, but the fixed tariffs, the legal equality, these strike at the very heart of how China views itself and its relationship with the outside world. For thousands of years, China has been the Middle Kingdom, the center of civilization. Foreign nations were viewed as tributaries, not equals. Foreign merchants operated in China by imperial grace, not by right. I must consult with my colleagues, you say, buying time. Pottinger nods. Of course. But I should inform you that my patience, and that of my fleet commanders, is limited. If agreement is not reached within 3 days, we will advance on Nanking and continue up the Yangtze. The implied threat is clear. Agree or watch the southern capital burn. Back on your boat, you confer with your assistants late into the night. Reports arrive hourly about British military movements. They're positioning artillery on the hills overlooking Nanking. Their ships are ranging up and down the river, mapping defences. They're preparing for an assault while talking peace, a strategy as old as warfare itself. We could request reinforcements, suggests your military advisor. The garrisons from the northern provinces would not arrive in time, you finish for him, and would not change the outcome even if they did. Then what options remain, my lord? You stare at the candle flame flickering on your desk. We negotiate the least damaging terms possible, and we learn. Learn what? Everything, how they build those ships, how their cannon fire explosive shells, how they navigate with such precision, how they organize their military and their commerce, everything. Over the next 2 days, you shuttle back and forth between your boat and the British flagship, haggling over details while accepting the core demands. The British are willing to reduce the indemnity slightly. They agree to phase in the opening of some ports. But on Hong Kong, the tariffs and legal equality, they won't budge. On the 3rd day, with British guns now visibly positioned on the hills above Nanking, you sign the preliminary agreement. The formal treaty will follow, but the outline is set. The Treaty of Nanking, the first of what will later be called the Unequal Treaties, is born. That night, alone in your cabin, you drink rice wine and contemplate what this means for China. You've spent your life serving an empire that considered itself the pinnacle of civilization. Now you've signed away pieces of its sovereignty to foreign barbarians with better weapons. The world has changed, you murmur to yourself, and we failed to notice. The formal signing of the Treaty of Nanking takes place 2 weeks later aboard HMS Cornwallis. You attend with other Chinese officials, all wearing expressions of carefully masked humiliation. Sir Henry Pottinger brings his own contingent, naval officers in crisp uniforms, East India Company officials in formal attire, merchants in expensive European suits. They make no attempt to hide their triumph. The treaty document itself is ornate, written on fine parchment in both languages. As you affix your seal beside your signature, you can't help but reflect on how this piece of paper will change the course of history. Hong Kong Island, a small but strategically located bit of Chinese territory, will now fly the British flag. 5 ports, Canton, Amoy, Foochow, Ningpo and Shanghai, will open to foreign residents and trade. The ancient Kohong monopoly system will end, replaced by free trade under fixed tariffs. British subjects accused of crimes in China will be tried by British, not Chinese courts. And opium, the poisonous drug that started this conflict, isn't even mentioned in the treaty. Its trade will continue unrestricted. A historic moment, Pottinger says, as servants pour champagne for the British delegation, the beginning of a new era in relations between our great nations. You accept a cup of tea instead, unable to celebrate your nation's humiliation. Indeed, Sir Henry, though I wonder if we will judge this era the same way. He regards you with something approaching sympathy. Progress is often painful, Commissioner, but China will benefit from closer integration with the world. Of that I am certain. Will it? You have your doubts, but you also have your instructions. Sign the treaty, prevent further hostilities, save what can be saved. The next morning, you begin your journey back to Beijing to report to the Emperor. It's a journey of over 1,000 miles, much of it by water, then overland through provinces increasingly restive with news of foreign victories. As your boat heads downriver, you pass British ships still anchored near Nanking, a reminder of the force backing their diplomatic demands. Their sailors watch you pass, some waving in what seems genuine friendliness. They don't understand what they've done. How could they? In the villages along your route, rumours have spread faster than official news. Peasants whisper about iron ships that breathe fire, about foreign devils with magical weapons, about the Emperor's armies defeated everywhere. Some whisper of worse, that the Emperor has lost the mandate of heaven, that the Qing dynasty, after 2 centuries of rule, is failing. You hear these whispers and worry. China has seen dynastic changes before. They're rarely peaceful. A month into your journey, you're met by an imperial messenger. The Emperor Daoguang requests your presence urgently. The messenger provides fresh horses, and you leave your slow river barge for a punishing overland ride to Beijing. The Forbidden City seems unchanged when you arrive, still magnificent, still isolated from the world beyond its vermilion walls, but the mood inside is anything but normal. You're taken immediately to the Hall of Literary Glory, where the Emperor receives officials for private audiences. Dao Guang looks older than when you last saw him, his face lined with worry. The Opium War has aged him. "Tell me everything," he commands after you perform the kowtow. "Spare nothing. I must know the full extent of our situation." For the next hour, you detail the treaty terms, the British military capabilities, your observations of their organisation and technology. The Emperor listens silently, occasionally closing his eyes as if in pain. "Could we have resisted further?" he finally asks. "No, Your Majesty. Their weapons are beyond anything in our arsenal. Their ships can destroy coastal cities at will while remaining beyond the reach of our cannon." How did this happen? Dao Guang's voice is soft, almost to himself. How did barbarians from a small island at the edge of the world defeat the Middle Kingdom? It's a profound question, one that will occupy Chinese scholars and officials for generations to come. They changed, Your Majesty. We did not. The Emperor nods slowly. And now we must change. But how? In what way? Without losing what makes us Chinese? These are questions you've pondered throughout your journey home. We must learn from them, Your Majesty, their sciences, their technologies, their ways of organizing armies and navies. But we must do so selectively, taking what is useful without adopting their values or beliefs. Is that possible? You hesitate. I do not know, Your Majesty, but we must try. The Emperor dismisses you with instructions to prepare a detailed written report. As you leave the hall, you realize you've just participated in a conversation that would have been unthinkable a few years ago. The Emperor of China asking how to learn from barbarians. Over the following weeks, you observe changes in the imperial court. Officials who advocated resistance to British demands have been sidelined. Those who favor cautious adaptation are ascendant. The emperor himself has ordered translations of Western scientific texts and reports on European military organizations. But change comes slowly to an empire as ancient as China, and time is not on your side. You're summoned again by the Emperor in late autumn. This time he receives you in his private study, an unprecedented intimacy that signals the importance of the conversation. I have read your report, Dao Guang says, gesturing to your detailed analysis of the British military and political system. It is illuminating. Thank you, Your Majesty. But I fear it may be too late. The Emperor looks older than ever, his shoulders bent as if under a physical weight. Reports from the south say the British are already establishing themselves in the treaty ports. They're building on Hong Kong as if they've owned it forever. And others, the French, the Americans, the Russians, are demanding similar treaties. This doesn't surprise you. The Treaty of Nanking included a most favored nation clause, ensuring that any privilege granted to another country would automatically extend to Britain. It created an incentive for every Western power to extract their own concessions. What would you advise? The Emperor asks. You choose your words carefully. We must buy time, Your Majesty. Grant what cannot be refused. Delay what can be delayed. Meanwhile, we learn their strengths and adapt them to our purposes. Dao Guang nods slowly. A sensible approach, though I fear it may not be enough. His fears prove prescient. Over the next few months, the representatives of France and the United States arrive in China, demanding their own treaties. Unable to resist militarily, China signs the Treaty of Wamokoa with France and the Treaty of Wanghia with the United States, each granting essentially the same privileges the British secured. The unequal treaty system is now firmly established. China, the ancient Middle Kingdom that once received tribute from surrounding nations, has been forced into a position of diplomatic inferiority. In the treaty ports, foreign enclaves spring up with their own laws, churches and customs. In Hong Kong, the British lay out roads and buildings as if they've been there for centuries rather than months. And everywhere, the opium trade flourishes, now conducted openly, rather than through smuggling. You watch these developments with a mixture of resignation and determination. The world has changed irrevocably. China must change with it or perish. One evening, as you sit in your Beijing home composing poetry, a lifelong habit that brings some solace in troubled times, a servant announces an unexpected visitor, a young officer from the imperial bodyguard named Zheng Guofan. You know of him by reputation, a brilliant scholar official with new ideas about reforming China's military and bureaucracy. His presence at your door is surprising. Forgive the intrusion, Your Excellency, Zheng says after formal greetings, but I have read your report to the Emperor about the British. I believe you understand what China faces better than most. I understand we were defeated, you reply cautiously. No. Zheng's voice is intense. You understand why we were defeated. And that is the first step toward ensuring it never happens again. Over tea, Zheng outlines his vision, a program of selective modernization, adopting Western military technology and organizational methods while maintaining Confucian values and social structures, building a navy that can compete with European fleets, establishing schools to teach foreign sciences and languages. It will take decades, he admits, perhaps generations, but what alternative do we have? You find yourself nodding along. Zheng is articulating what you've been thinking since watching British steamships sail with impunity up the Yangtze. The Emperor must be persuaded, you say. He will be, Zheng assures you, by necessity, if not by choice. As your visitor departs, you feel something you haven't experienced since before the war began: hope. Not that the unequal treaties will be quickly overturned or foreign influence easily expelled, but that China might, over time, adapt and survive in this new world it has been forced to join. The path will not be easy. The humiliations are not over. Indeed, they have just begun. But China has endured for thousands of years, absorbing invaders, surviving catastrophes, reinventing itself when necessary. Perhaps this defeat, painful as it is, will eventually lead to renewal. Perhaps future generations will look back on the Treaty of Nanking not just as the beginning of China's century of humiliation, but as the spark that eventually forged a new kind of Chinese strength. It's a hope you cling to as darkness falls over Beijing and the weight of an empire's fate rests on shoulders suddenly too tired to bear it. The morning fog rolls off the Huangpu River, shrouding the Shanghai waterfront in grey mist. You pull your thin jacket tighter and hurry through the narrow streets toward the docks. 5 years ago, these streets would have been filled with local merchants and fishermen. Now the crowd is peppered with foreign faces: British, French, American. It's 1847, and you're a 30-year-old dock worker in Shanghai, one of the 5 ports forced open by the Treaty of Nanking. Your father was a respected silk merchant before the war. Now he sits at home, smoking opium and staring at walls. The family business is gone. The family savings, too. Which is why you're here, hauling cargo for half the wages a Chinese-owned company would have paid before the foreigners came. Hey, you there! A red-faced Englishman waves at you from beside a stack of wooden crates. Need these moved to Warehouse 3. Chop chop. You bow slightly and begin loading the crates onto your pushcart. They're heavy, probably machine parts or metal goods. Definitely not opium. That comes in different packaging and gets handled by different workers who get paid more and don't ask questions. What's in these? You ask in the broken English you've picked up over the past few years. The Englishman snorts. Nothing that concerns you. Just get them to Warehouse 3 before noon. As you push your cart along the waterfront, you pass ships from across the world. Sleek British clippers, boxy Dutch merchantmen, even the occasional American vessel. The harbour that once held primarily Chinese junks is now an international crossroads. Shanghai has transformed almost overnight. In the new foreign concessions, European-style buildings rise where Chinese homes once stood. The British concession has neat roads and gas lighting. The French concession features small cafes and Catholic churches, all built on land that was Chinese just a few years ago. Outside the foreign enclaves, the Chinese city continues much as before, though changed in subtle ways. Western goods appear in market stalls. Christianity is preached openly in makeshift chapels. Foreign soldiers and sailors carouse in tea houses turned into something resembling Western taverns. Lao Chen, a voice calls out as you navigate a particularly crowded intersection. It's your cousin Wei, who works as a translator for a British trading company. Unlike you, he spoke some English before the foreigners arrived, taught by missionaries who visited secretly when such things were still illegal. Late for lunch? Wei falls in beside your cart, helping you push through the crowd. No lunch today, you grunt. Extra deliveries, trying to earn enough for medicine for father. Wei's expression darkens. Still smoking, more than ever. Your father's addiction is hardly unique. Since the treaties forced China to accept opium imports, the drug flows freely through all the treaty ports. What was once smuggled now arrives in broad daylight, taxed and regulated like any other commodity. I heard hiring news, Wei says, lowering his voice. Big English company looking for workers, not for here, for America. You glance at him. America? Or railroad building, 2-year contract, good money they say. How good? Enough to send home silver every month, enough to buy back your father's shop when you return. The prospect is tempting. Many Chinese have already left for California, Australia, and other distant lands. Some by choice, seeking opportunity. Others through coolie contracts that amount to little more than temporary slavery. I'd have to leave my parents, you say. They'd survive on what you send back. Wei pauses. Think about it. What future is there here, moving boxes for foreigners until your back breaks? He's not wrong. The treaty system has transformed China's economy, and not to your benefit. Foreign goods arrive free of significant tariffs, undermining local industries. Foreign merchants operate under their own laws, giving them advantages Chinese businesses can't match. The self-sufficient China of your childhood is vanishing, replaced by something more connected to the world, but less in control of its own destiny. You reach Warehouse 3 and begin unloading the crates. Wei helps, though he's not dressed for manual labour in his Western-style suit. There's a ship leaving next week, he says, as you stack the last crate. I can introduce you to the hiring agent. Just think about it. You nod, neither committing nor refusing. The thought of crossing the ocean to a country you know nothing about is terrifying, but staying here, watching your family sink further into poverty while foreigners prosper on Chinese soil, that's its own kind of terror. That evening, you take a different route home, passing through the British concession. You're not strictly forbidden from being here. Chinese servants and workers come and go, but you're clearly unwelcome after business hours. A British policeman watches you suspiciously as you walk by. The contrast between this area and your own neighbourhood is stark. Here, the streets are clean and well lit. Solid brick buildings house foreign businesses and residences. Through windows you glimpse comfortable furnishings, paintings, mirrors, wealth displayed openly. Outside a large building flying the British flag, a well-dressed Chinese man emerges, bowing repeatedly to his British companion. You recognize him as Takey, one of the few Chinese merchants who've prospered under the new system. He's grown rich by cooperating with the foreigners, facilitating trade while many traditional Chinese businesses collapse. Complete success, I promise you, Takey says in careful English. Your investment will triple at minimum. The Englishman laughs. If you're half as good as your reputation, I don't doubt it. They shake hands, an odd Western custom you've observed but never participated in, and part ways. As you continue homeward, you wonder what it would take to become like Takey, to adapt so completely to the new order that you could thrive within it. Is it just a matter of learning English and Western ways, or does it require something else, a willingness to set aside pride, tradition, everything that makes you Chinese? Your neighborhood, when you reach it, seems shabbier than ever after the gleaming foreign enclave. Narrow streets, dilapidated wooden structures, open sewers, children play in dirty alleys, old men sit smoking pipes of tobacco or opium, depending on what they can afford. Your home is small but clean, thanks to your mother's tireless efforts. She greets you with a bowl of rice and pickled vegetables. Simple fare, but all the family can manage these days. Your father sits in the corner, pipe in hand, eyes unfocused. He was once a proud man, respected by everyone in the district. The war and its aftermath broke something in him. The business he spent decades building became unsustainable when foreign imports undercut his prices. His savings went to opium, first as an occasional escape, then as a daily necessity. "I heard about jobs in America," you tell your mother quietly as she serves the meal. "Good pay, chance to save." She freezes momentarily, then continues spooning rice. "So far away. 2 years. I could send money home, enough for medicine, better food. If you survive." Her voice is flat. Many don't. She's right, of course. You've heard the stories. Chinese workers dying of disease or exhaustion in foreign lands, cheated out of wages, abused by overseers, attacked by locals who resent their presence. But you've also heard stories of those who returned with more silver than they could have earned in a lifetime in China, who bought land or businesses, who escaped the trap that China has become. Before you can respond, a commotion erupts outside, shouts, running feet. You go to the door and see neighbours rushing toward the district's main square. "What's happening?" you call to a passing acquaintance. "News from the south," he yells back. "Rebellion, someone's fighting the Qing." You follow the crowd to the square where a breathless messenger is sharing details with the gathered residents. He calls himself the younger brother of Jesus Christ, the messenger announces. Hong Xiuquan says he's going to overthrow the Qing and drive out the foreigners. "Where?" someone shouts. "Guangxi province already controls several villages. Government troops sent against him were defeated." The crowd buzzes with excitement and apprehension. Rebellions aren't uncommon in Chinese history. Dynasties rise and fall. The mandate of heaven transfers. But this one sounds different. Religious. Apocalyptic. "He's a Christian," an old man asks skeptically. "His own version," the messenger replies, "says the foreigners corrupted the true faith. Says God spoke to him directly." You listen with growing interest. Hong Xiuquan fighting both the Qing government that failed to protect China and the foreigners who humiliated it. It's a message perfectly calibrated for these troubled times. Later that night, the rebellion is all anyone can talk about. In tea houses and on street corners, people speculate about Hong's chances, his intentions, his divine mandate or lack thereof. They say he forbids opium, a neighbour tells you over cups of weak tea. Forbids foot-binding too, wants men and women equal. Madness, scoffs another. Against nature. Is it madness to want China strong again? Counters a third. To resist both Manchu overlords and foreign devils? The Manchu question complicates everything. The Qing dynasty, for all its claims to Chineseness, originated as foreign conquerors from beyond the Great Wall. Now, after 2 centuries of rule, they've failed to protect China from a new wave of foreign incursion. "The Taiping will never reach us," says the skeptic. "The imperial army will crush them." But his voice lacks conviction. Everyone has seen how easily the British defeated those same imperial armies. The government's aura of invincibility has been shattered. Over the following weeks, more news trickles in. The Taiping Rebellion is growing, attracting peasants, workers, and the desperate. Hong Xiuquan's religious message, a strange blend of Christianity, Chinese tradition, and apocalyptic prophecy, resonates with those who feel abandoned by both traditional structures and the new order. You find yourself drawn to the reports, even as you continue your daily routine of back-breaking labor. The rebellion feels like a response to the same forces that have upended your life. Foreign encroachment, government failure, economic disruption. Wei continues to press you about America. The ship leaves in 3 days. The hiring agent needs your answer tomorrow. What happens in America? You ask him during a rare break. What would I do there? Railroad work, he says. Hard labor, but the pay is good. And after the contract ends, you could stay if you wanted. Open a shop, perhaps, or return with your savings. And if the work kills me, if they cheat me of wages, Wei hesitates. It's a risk. But staying here, watching your family sink further into poverty, is that not also a risk? That evening, you discuss it with your mother. Your father is too lost in his opium haze to participate meaningfully in the decision. I don't want you to go, she admits, but I don't want you to waste your life here either. If I send money home, you say, you could move to a better place, get proper medicine for father. If. She emphasizes the conditional. Many promises are made to those desperate enough to listen. In the end, the decision is made for you by events beyond your control. The next morning, you arrive at the docks to find them in chaos. A British merchant ship has been attacked downriver by pirates, or perhaps Taiping rebels, the rumors conflict. In response, all Chinese workers are being checked, questioned, suspected. No work today, the British foreman tells the gathered labourers. Come back tomorrow, or next week. We'll send word. Just like that, your income vanishes. No warning, no compensation, no recourse. In the treaty port system, Chinese workers have few rights and fewer protections. You find Wei at the trading company where he works, hoping he might know of alternative employment. Perfect timing, he says, after hearing of your situation. Come with me to the recruitment office now. We can still secure you a place on tomorrow's ship. The recruitment office is in a nondescript building near the waterfront. Inside, a British agent and his Chinese assistant process a line of men, mostly young, mostly poor, all looking for a way out of China's troubles. The contract they offer is straightforward in its exploitation. 2 years of labor on the American Transcontinental Railroad. Room and board provided, deducted from wages. Transportation provided, deducted from wages. Tools provided, deducted from wages. The remainder sent home monthly or paid in full upon completion of service. Sign here, the Chinese assistant says, pointing to a document written in English with Chinese characters beneath. You hesitate. What protections do I have? If conditions are bad, if they don't pay, the assistant laughs. You can always walk home from America. It's not reassuring, but with your job gone and your family's needs mounting, what choice do you have? You sign. The following day, you join 200 other Chinese men boarding a British clipper bound for California. The accommodations are cramped, little more than shelves in the ship's hold where you'll sleep for the 2-month journey. As Shanghai recedes behind you, you wonder if you'll ever see it again, if the city will even be recognizable if you do return. The world is changing faster than anyone could have imagined, and ordinary people like you are caught in currents beyond their control. Some of your fellow passengers speak of opportunity in the Golden Mountain, as they call America. Others simply need the money. A few admit they're fleeing troubles, debts, crimes, family conflicts. All share the desperate hope that somewhere else must be better than China right now. A week into the journey, news reaches the ship via another vessel passing in the opposite direction. Emperor Daoguang is dead. His son, Xianfeng, now sits on the dragon throne. A young emperor, just 19 years old, inheriting a dynasty under unprecedented pressure. Bad omens, mutters an old man near you. New emperor, barbarians controlling our ports, Taiping rebellion growing. Heaven's displeasure is clear. You say nothing, but you share his foreboding. China seems caught between forces pulling it apart, foreign powers demanding more concessions, internal rebellions challenging imperial authority, an economy increasingly dependent on external trade, much of it in opium. The ship sails on, carrying you and your fellow workers toward an uncertain future in a strange land. Behind you, China continues its painful transition into a new era, one where its ancient isolation has been forcibly ended, its sovereignty compromised, its social fabric strained. The journey is long and difficult. 2 men die of fever before you're halfway across the Pacific. Others fall ill but recover. The food is poor, the water often brackish, but still, it might be worth it if the promises of wages prove true. As the California coast finally appears on the horizon, you find yourself thinking of your father, lost in his opium dreams, of Wei, navigating between worlds as a translator, of Take, prospering by embracing the new order, of Hong Xiuquan, fighting to create a different future entirely. Different responses to the same fundamental reality. The old China is gone, swept away by forces symbolized by those British warships that sailed with impunity up the Yangtze. What will replace it remains uncertain, and you, crossing an ocean to build railroads in America, are just one small part of this great transformation. One life reshaped by the collision of empires and the war fought over a drug that has destroyed countless families, including your own. The ship docks in San Francisco Bay. A new chapter begins, but the story of China's century of humiliation, set in motion by the Opium Wars, has only just begun. The rain falls in sheets, turning the narrow streets of Canton into muddy rivers. Your uniform is soaked through, your rifle protected only by the oilcloth wrapped hastily around it. Around you, other French Marines huddle under whatever shelter they can find, doorways, awnings, overhangs. It's October 1856, and you're a 24-year-old corporal in the French Marine Infantry, part of the force sent to China to protect French interests. You never expected to be here, half a world away from your village in Normandy, but empires have a way of sending their sons to distant shores. "How much longer, Corporal?" asks a young private beside you, water streaming from his képi. "Until the English give the signal," you reply, trying to sound more confident than you feel. "Then we move." You've been in China for 3 months, mostly stationed in Macau, your first deployment outside France. You expected pirates, perhaps, local bandits. Instead, you found yourself in the opening moves of what will become known as the Second Opium War. The pretext for this new conflict seems absurdly small. A Chinese vessel called the Arrow, registered in Hong Kong but owned and operated by Chinese, was boarded by Qing officials who arrested several crew members suspected of piracy. During the boarding, depending on whose version you believe, the British flag was either lowered deliberately or fell accidentally. Either way, the British consul in Canton, Harry Parkes, erupted in outrage, demanding an apology for this insult to the British flag. When the Chinese commissioner, Ye Mingchen, refused, British warships began bombarding the city. France had no direct stake in the Arrow incident, but your country's leadership saw an opportunity to expand influence in China, using the murder of a French missionary in Guangxi province as justification for joining the British campaign. And so you find yourself here, soaked and miserable, waiting to attack a city that has done nothing to France. The English say the Chinese need to be taught respect, continues the young private, wiping rain from his face, that they didn't honour the treaties from the last war. You've heard the same justification. The treaties that ended the First Opium War weren't being fully implemented. Chinese officials still created obstacles for foreign merchants. The promised opening of China was proceeding too slowly for Western tastes. Maybe, you say non-committally, or maybe there's money to be made here. You're no fool. You've seen how trade drives empire. France wants its share of the China market, tea, silk, porcelain, access to hundreds of millions of potential customers for French goods. If that requires military action, so be it. A whistle sounds from down the street, the signal. Your lieutenant appears from a doorway, gesturing urgently. Form up, we're moving. You herd your squad into position. The rain has slackened slightly, though the streets remain treacherous underfoot. In the distance, you hear the boom of naval guns, British ships bombarding Chinese positions as they have been for weeks. Your company advances through the narrow streets toward the city wall. The plan is coordinated with the British. They'll attack from the riverside, while French forces breach the wall at a less defended section. The closer you get to the wall, the more signs of earlier bombardment you see. Buildings with gaping holes, debris scattered across streets, abandoned shops and homes. Most civilians fled when the shelling began, though you occasionally glimpse frightened faces peering from windows. "Where is everyone?" asks the private. "Gone," you reply. "If they're smart." At the base of the city wall, engineers are already positioning ladders and explosives. Your company spreads out, providing covering fire as they work. Sporadic shots come from the top of the wall, Chinese defenders, but fewer than expected. The rain works to your advantage, reducing visibility and dampening Chinese morale. The engineers signal they're ready. An officer raises his sword, and the charge begins. You're halfway up your ladder when the explosion breaches the wall. The concussion nearly knocks you off, but you grip tightly and continue climbing. At the top, a Chinese defender rushes you with a spear. Your bayonet meets him first. He falls backward, eyes wide with surprise. It's your first kill in combat. There's no time to process it. More defenders appear. Shots echo along the wall. Your training takes over. Load, aim, fire, reload. Within 20 minutes, your section of the wall is secured. Looking toward the river, you see British Marines have also breached the defences. Canton, a city of 1 million people, is falling to a few thousand Western troops. By evening, key parts of the city are under foreign control. You establish a position in what was once a merchant's home, now hastily converted to a military post. The family's possessions remain scattered about. Scrolls, porcelain, furniture inlaid with mother-of-pearl. Beautiful things. Abandoned in panic. "We're not supposed to loot," your lieutenant announces to the assembled squad. "Official orders." His tone makes it clear that what happens when officers aren't looking is a different matter. Already, some soldiers are pocketing small items, jade figurines, silver trinkets, anything that might fetch a price back home. You find yourself standing before a scroll painting of mountains and mist. Something about its quiet dignity stops you from rolling it up and stuffing it in your pack. This isn't why you joined the Marines, not to steal from frightened civilians. "Thinking of redecorating your barracks?" asks Sergeant Dupuis, appearing beside you. "Just looking," you reply. Dupuis snorts. "Look all you want. Someone else will take it if you don't." He's probably right. War has its own brutal logic. What you don't take will likely be taken by someone else or destroyed in the fighting. Still, you leave the scroll hanging. The next few days are a blur of patrols, skirmishes, and tense standoffs with the remaining Chinese forces. Canton doesn't surrender officially, but resistance becomes increasingly disorganized. Commissioner Ye, who refused to apologize for the arrow incident, is captured trying to escape and sent into exile. The ease of your victory is almost embarrassing. Despite having thousands of troops in the region, the Chinese military puts up less effective resistance than you faced in training exercises back in France. Their weapons are outdated, their tactics obsolete, their morale crumbling. "It's not even sporting," comments Lieutenant Roussel one evening as your company returns from patrol. "Like shooting fish in a barrel." "The fish didn't ask us to shoot them," you reply before you can stop yourself. The lieutenant gives you a sharp look. "Having second thoughts, Corporal?" "No, sir, just an observation. But you are having doubts. The justification for this war seems flimsier the longer you're here. The Arrow incident feels like a convenient excuse for something the Western powers wanted to do anyway. Force China further open, secure additional concessions, demonstrate their military superiority. In January 1858, after Canton is firmly under Anglo-French control, your unit receives new orders. You're to join a larger expedition heading north to the mouth of the Peiho River, threatening Tientsin and, by extension, Peking itself. The goal is to force the Emperor Shenfeng to negotiate a new treaty. The voyage north takes you along the China coast in spring. Under different circumstances, it might be pleasant. Blue waters, green hills, fishing villages nestled in protected coves. But you're an invader here, part of a force bringing war to people who never harmed France. Your transport anchors near the Taku forts, which guard the mouth of the Peiho River. The forts are impressive from a distance, solid earthworks mounted with large cannon. But you've seen what British naval guns can do to such defences. Sure enough, after a brief exchange of fire, the forts fall. The way to Tientsin lies open. "We'll be in Peking within the month," predicts Sergeant Dupuis as your company prepares to disembark. "The Emperor will give us whatever we want." "Why stop there?" jokes a private. "Maybe we should put a Frenchman on the dragon throne." Everyone laughs, but there's a discomforting truth beneath the humour. Where does Western expansion stop? Having forced their way into China's treaty ports, the foreign powers now drive toward its capital. What comes after that? Tientsin offers no resistance. Chinese negotiators arrive, desperate to keep the foreign forces from approaching Peking. The discussions take place aboard a British warship, with high-ranking diplomats handling the details. As a common soldier, you hear only rumours and speculation. They're asking for more ports to be opened. They want permanent ambassadors in Peking. They're demanding the opium trade be legalized. This last item particularly troubles you. France portrays itself as bringing civilization and Christianity to China. How does flooding the country with an addictive drug advance either cause? In June 1858, a treaty is finally signed. From your position guarding the diplomatic compound, you observe the official ceremony from a distance. Uniformed officials, formal bows, documents signed and sealed. The Treaty of Tientsin gives the Western powers everything they demanded and more. The Chinese must open 10 additional ports to foreign trade. Foreign ambassadors will establish permanent residence in Peking. Christian missionaries will be allowed to travel freely throughout China. The opium trade will be legalized, and China must pay massive indemnities to both Britain and France. "Victory," declares Lieutenant Roussel that evening, breaking open a bottle of cognac to share with the officers. Complete and total. The enlisted men celebrate too, with their ration of wine increased for the occasion, but your own feelings are complicated. This doesn't feel like the victories you imagined when you enlisted, defending France against enemy armies, not forcing unequal treaties on a distant empire. "You're quiet tonight," observes Private Moreau, the young soldier who's been under your wing since Canton. "Just tired," you reply. "We're going home soon," they say. "Back to France." You nod, though you're not sure home will feel the same after what you've seen here. The Treaty of Tientsin should have ended the conflict, but history is rarely so neat. When British diplomat Frederick Bruce returns the following year to exchange ratifications and establish a British legation in Peking, he finds the Chinese have strengthened the Taku forts and blocked the river with barriers. Rather than taking an alternative route offered by Chinese officials, Bruce attempts to force passage. The resulting Battle of Taku Forts ends in a humiliating defeat for Anglo-French forces, the first significant Chinese victory of either Opium War. Your unit, which had been preparing to return to France, receives new orders. The defeat must be avenged. A larger expedition is being assembled. The war that seemed over will continue. You spend the winter of 1859 in Shanghai, drilling with newly arrived reinforcements. The Western powers are determined to make a show of overwhelming force. This time they'll send more than 10,000 British and French troops, the largest European army ever assembled in Asia. During these months of preparation, you have opportunities to explore Shanghai and observe civilian life in a treaty port. The contrast between the European settlements and the Chinese city is stark. In the foreign concessions, broad streets, Western architecture and modern amenities create a European enclave in the heart of China. In the Chinese sections, traditional ways continue, though increasingly influenced by foreign presence. You befriend a local merchant named Liang, who speaks some French, learned from missionaries. Over cups of tea in his small shop, he offers perspectives you won't hear from your officers. You call this the Arrow War, he tells you. We call it the Second Foreign Devils War. Foreign devils? You repeat, mildly offended. Liang shrugs apologetically. Not my words, but you must understand how this looks to us. You come with your ships and guns, you demand we buy your goods and sell you ours on your terms. When we refuse, you bombard our cities. The treaties were signed by your emperor, you point out. We're enforcing agreements. Agreements made with a knife at our throat. Liang pours more tea. Tell me, if French cities were bombarded until your emperor signed away French sovereignty, would you consider those agreements fair? You have no good answer. In June 1860, the massive Anglo-French expedition finally departs Shanghai, heading north toward the Taku forts once again. This time, nothing is left to chance. The force includes the latest weaponry, Armstrong guns that can fire explosive shells accurately over great distances, Enfield rifles for the infantry, and fully equipped cavalry units. The Battle of Taku Forts, when it comes, is less a battle than a slaughter. The Chinese defenders fight bravely, but are hopelessly outmatched by modern European weaponry and tactics. Within hours, the forts that repulsed the Western powers a year earlier lie in ruins. The way to Peking now lies open, with only token resistance between the Anglo-French army and the celestial capital. Emperor Xianfeng flees to his summer palace at Jehol, leaving his brother Prince Gong to handle negotiations. But negotiations stall when Chinese forces capture a small British-French party travelling under flag of truce. Reports that the prisoners are being tortured inflame Western anger. The march on Peking accelerates. In early October, the foreign army reaches the outskirts of the imperial capital. Your regiment camps near the emperor's summer palace, the Yuanming Gardens, a vast complex of palaces, pavilions, and gardens considered one of the wonders of the Chinese Empire. We're to secure the perimeter, your lieutenant informs the company. No one enters without permission. The order proves impossible to enforce. Within hours, soldiers from both armies, first officers, then common troops, begin entering the palace grounds. What follows is nothing short of pillage. Priceless artifacts, jade carvings, golden statues, ancient scrolls, imperial jewellery are carried away by the armful. "Everyone's taking something," urges Private Moreau, holding a small jade figurine. "You should too, Corporal. Might be your only chance to bring home something worthwhile from this god-forsaken place." You hesitate, then pocket a small ivory box, not for its value, but as a reminder of this moment, of what happens when civilization's veneer cracks. The looting continues for days. Then, following the discovery that some of the captured truce party died under torture, the British commander Lord Elgin orders the Summer Palace burned to the ground. The destruction is meant as punishment for the treatment of prisoners, though it strikes mainly at Chinese cultural heritage rather than its military. You watch from a distance as the magnificent structures burn, columns of smoke rising into the autumn sky. 3 centuries of imperial treasures reduced to ash in a day. Even hardened soldiers in your unit fall silent at the spectacle. "Barbarians," murmurs Sergeant Dupuis beside you. "They call us foreign devils, but look what we've become." He's not wrong. There's something deeply disturbing about destroying cultural treasures as an act of war, but orders are orders. The fire burns until there's nothing left to consume. Days later, Prince Gong signs the Convention of Peking, ratifying the Treaty of Tientsin with additional concessions. Kowloon Peninsula is ceded to Britain. The indemnities are increased. Foreign diplomats will establish permanent residence in Peking. Christians will be granted full rights to own property and proselytize throughout China. The Second Opium War is officially over. China has been forced at gunpoint to open itself further to Western influence and commerce. The ancient empire that once considered itself the centre of civilization now bends to the demands of barbarians from across the sea. As you prepare to return to France, you find yourself wondering what you've accomplished here. Expanded French influence, certainly. Protected commercial interests. Demonstrated Western military superiority. But at what cost? To China, to its people, to your own sense of what it means to be a soldier of France? The ivory box sits in your pack, a small reminder of larger questions that have no easy answers. The Hong Kong morning is clear and bright as you step onto the veranda of your hillside home. At 65, your joints protest more than they once did, but you still rise with the sun from habit. 30 years in China does that to a man. From here, you can see the entire harbour, a forest of masts and smokestacks, ships from every trading nation on earth, clippers, steamers, junks, sampans. The harbour never sleeps, commerce flowing endlessly like the tides. It's 1860, and you're no longer the young merchant who first arrived in Canton decades ago. Now you're Thomas Barrett, senior partner in Barrett & Sons Trading Company, one of Hong Kong's most respected firms. You've made your fortune here, riding the wave of British expansion in China. Your home, a grand colonial structure on the peak, stands as testament to that success. Your servant brings tea. Proper English breakfast, not the local variety. Some habits remain unchanged despite your years in the East. "The paper, sir," he says, placing the Hong Kong Daily Press beside your cup. The headlines catch your eye immediately. Anglo-French forces march on Peking, Summer Palace burned, convention signed. So it's done. The Second Opium War, dragging on these past 4 years, has finally reached its conclusion. The Chinese emperor, or rather his brother Prince Gong, has been forced to accept even more humiliating terms than those imposed after the First War. You skim the article, which brims with patriotic satisfaction. The burning of the Summer Palace is described as righteous retribution for Chinese treachery. The new concessions are listed as victories for civilization and commerce. The tone is triumphant, untroubled by doubt. Setting down the paper, you gaze again at the harbour. You've witnessed such changes in your lifetime. When you first arrived, Hong Kong was a barren island with a few fishing villages. Now it's a thriving British colony with over 120,000 people, grand buildings, busy streets, and endless trade. Your thoughts drift back to the beginning, to that opium den in Canton you visited as a young man, to the trade disputes that spiraled into war, to Commissioner Lin destroying those 20,000 chests of opium. So much has happened since then, so much has changed. A knock at the door interrupts your reverie. Your oldest son, James, enters, 30 now, born in China, though educated in England. He's taken over most of the daily management of the company while you enjoy semi-retirement. "Morning, father," he says brightly. "Have you seen the news?" You nod toward the paper. "Just reading it." "Tremendous victory," James continues, helping himself to tea. "The Chinese will have to accept British merchants throughout the country now. No more restrictions. No more Canton system. The entire market opened at last." "Indeed." Your tone is neutral. James gives you a curious look. You don't seem pleased. How to explain the complex emotions that swirl within you? You've profited handsomely from Britain's forcible opening of China. Your company now trades legally in goods that once required smuggling. Your ships enter ports that were once forbidden. Your property in Hong Kong has multiplied in value many times over. Yet you've also seen the cost. The addiction spreading through Chinese society, the humiliation of a once proud empire, the burning of treasures that survived centuries only to be destroyed in a day. "I was just reflecting," you say carefully, "on how we got here." James waves a dismissive hand. "Ancient history now. The important thing is where we go next. The Convention of Peking changes everything. We can establish offices in every treaty port. We can travel inland. We can hire Chinese without restriction." He's right. From a business perspective, the new treaty expands all the advantages secured in the previous agreements. The barriers to trade have been systematically dismantled. China, once so isolated and self-sufficient, has been prized open like an oyster. "I received a letter from Jardine's office," James continues, referring to the powerful trading house that once led the opium trade. "They're organizing a consortium to develop the Kowloon Peninsula. Now that it's been formally ceded to Britain, there's money to be made in construction, infrastructure, warehousing. And what of the Chinese already living there, you ask? James shrugs. "They'll be compensated, I imagine, or relocated. Progress marches on, father." Progress. Such a convenient word. It justifies so much. Later that morning, you visit your company's offices in the Central District. The streets are busy with rickshaws, sedan chairs, carts and pedestrians, a mix of Europeans in tropical whites and Chinese in traditional garb. Hong Kong is a hybrid place, neither fully British nor Chinese, but something new emerging from the collision of empires. Your office occupies the second floor of a solid brick building near the waterfront. As founder and senior partner, you maintain a private sanctuary, a room with dark wood panelling, leather chairs and windows overlooking the harbour. On the walls hang maps of China, shipping charts, and a portrait of Queen Victoria. Your clerk brings the latest correspondence, letters from London, invoices from suppliers in India, reports from agents in the treaty ports. Business continues its steady rhythm regardless of wars and treaties. One envelope catches your attention, addressed in a familiar hand. Opening it, you find a letter from an old acquaintance, William Howard, now a diplomat attached to the British legation in Peking. "My dear Barrett, it begins. I write to you from the aftermath of our glorious victory, though I confess glory feels in short supply amid the ashes of the summer palace. Perhaps it's the advancing years making me sentimental, but I cannot take the satisfaction in these events that our countrymen seem to expect. Howard goes on to describe, in private terms far different from the newspaper accounts, the looting of the imperial collections and the subsequent burning of the buildings. He writes of priceless artifacts, jade carvings, porcelain from dynasties past, ancient scrolls, golden statues, carried off by soldiers or destroyed in the flames. Or one might argue it was necessary as punishment for Chinese treatment of prisoners, Howard continues, but I cannot help feeling we have obliterated something irreplaceable. These were not merely Chinese treasures, but world treasures. Future generations may judge our actions harshly. You set the letter down, troubled by its contents, yet grateful for Howard's candour. Few Britons in China would express such doubts, at least publicly. Empire requires certainty, not moral qualms. Your reverie is interrupted by a knock. Your foreman, Liang, enters, a capable Chinese man who has worked for your company for 15 years, rising from dock worker to a position of significant responsibility. The shipment from Calcutta has arrived, Mr. Barrett, he reports. Tea exports are ready for the London Clipper, and the silk from Suzhou awaits your inspection. You thank him and ask about his family. His oldest son has recently begun working for a British bank, one of the new generation of Chinese adapting to foreign presence, learning English, adopting Western business methods. He does well, Liang says with cautious pride, but some call him a collaborator. And what do you think? Liang chooses his words carefully. I think that China is changing. My grandfather would not recognize this world. My grandson will not remember the old ways. We must live in the time we are given. It's a diplomatic answer, but beneath it lies a truth that resonates with you. Neither of you chose this new world order. You've simply adapted to it, finding your place within its structures. After Liang leaves, you find yourself drawn to the window again, watching the harbour traffic. A Royal Navy warship rides at anchor, a visible reminder of the force undergirding Britain's commercial expansion. Merchant ships load and unload, transferring goods between continents. Small Chinese sampans weave between the larger vessels like water insects. This is the world you've helped create, for better or worse. A world where British gunboats force treaties on ancient empires, where opium flows legally into China, enriching British merchants while addicting Chinese citizens, where Hong Kong flies the Union Jack over territory that was Chinese for thousands of years. The rest of the day passes in routine business matters. By late afternoon, you decide to take a sampan across the harbour to Kowloon, recently acquired by Britain under the Convention of Peking. You want to see this new addition to the colony firsthand before your son's consortium begins its development plans. The sampan delivers you to a simple pier on the Kowloon side. Unlike Hong Kong Island with its growing British infrastructure, Kowloon remains largely Chinese in character. Villages, small farms, simple buildings. This will change rapidly now that it's under British control. You walk along the waterfront, observing. Fishermen mend nets, children play in shallow water, women wash clothes. Normal life continues despite the changing flags and distant treaties. An old man sits on a boulder near the water's edge, smoking a pipe and gazing toward Hong Kong Island. Something about his weathered face and dignified bearing catches your attention. May I join you? You ask in Cantonese, not fluent but serviceable after your years here. He looks surprised to hear a European speak his language, but nods assent. You introduce yourself simply as Thomas, a merchant. He gives his name as Chen, a fisherman, though these old bones don't go out on the water much now. For a while, you sit in companionable silence, watching the harbour traffic. Then Chen gestures with his pipe toward Hong Kong. "When I was a boy, there was nothing there but villages like this one," he says. "Now look, such tall buildings, such busy streets, all in one lifetime. Much has changed, you agree?" They say Kowloon will be the same soon, that the foreign devils, forgive me, the British, will build here too. They will, Chen nods, accepting this as inevitable. "My grandson works over there now," he says, pointing toward Hong Kong, "in a British company, speaks your language better than I speak mine." He chuckles softly. "He says I should move to the city, that the future is there. And will you?" "No." Chen taps his pipe against the rock. "I'm too old to change. Let the young adapt. I'll die a Chinese fisherman, as my father did." His quiet dignity moves you. This man has witnessed his world transformed by forces beyond his control. Western imperialism, opium, war, treaties signed under duress. Yet he maintains his identity, his connection to tradition. "Tell me," Chen says suddenly, "is it true they burned the Emperor's summer palace?" The question catches you off guard with its directness. "Yes," you admit. "The British and French forces burned it." Why? The single word carries the weight of genuine incomprehension. How to explain the complex rationales, the diplomatic calculations, the assertions of Western power? In the end, you opt for the official justification. Some British and French envoys were captured and tortured. The burning was meant as punishment. Chen absorbs this. So, because a few men were mistreated, they destroyed treasures that belonged to all Chinese, treasures created by our ancestors over centuries. Put that way, it does sound disproportionate, even to your ears. War has its own logic, you say, aware of how inadequate this sounds. Indeed, Chen taps out his spent pipe. The logic of the strong doing what they will, while the weak suffer what they must. The phrase, echoing ancient Greek historians, surprises you coming from this Chinese fisherman. It reminds you that wisdom isn't the exclusive province of Western civilization. As the sun begins to set, you take your leave, thanking Chen for the conversation. He nods, resuming his contemplation of the harbour as you walk back toward the pier. That evening, dining alone on your veranda, you reflect on the day's encounters, your son's enthusiasm for new commercial opportunities, Howard's troubled letter about the summer palace, Liang's careful navigation between cultures, old Chen's dignity in the face of upheaval. Different perspectives on the same historical moment. The Second Opium War is ending, just as the first did, with China further open to Western influence and commerce. The immediate winners and losers seem clear, but history's final judgment, that remains to be written. You sip your port, watching lights twinkle on in the harbour as darkness falls. You've lived through remarkable times, witnessed the forcible opening of the world's oldest continuous civilization, participated in the expansion of British power to its zenith. Your personal fortunes have risen with the empire's reach. Yet doubts linger. Reports from the mainland speak of growing unrest. The Taiping Rebellion still rages in southern provinces. Foreign incursions have weakened the Qing dynasty's authority. An opium addiction continues to spread through Chinese society. Emperor Xianfeng, humiliated by foreign armies reaching his capital, has retreated to his hunting lodge at Jehol. Rumors say his health is failing, that he seeks escape in alcohol and opium. The irony isn't lost on you. The emperor of a nation devastated by British opium now himself seeks solace in the drug. Within a year, news reaches Hong Kong that Xianfeng has died at age 30, broken in spirit and health. His 6-year-old son becomes the Tongji Emperor, with regents ruling in his name. The once mighty Qing dynasty continues its slow decline. The decades that follow bring more changes. Your company prospers in the new commercial environment. Hong Kong grows into a major entrepot linking east and west. The treaty port system expands, creating islands of Western influence throughout coastal China. You watch as your children and grandchildren grow up in this hybrid world. British subjects born in China, equally at home in London drawing rooms or Hong Kong markets. They take for granted the structures of power and commerce that you helped establish. By the 1890s, in your twilight years, you observe new powers entering the competition for influence in China. Germany, Russia, and Japan carve out their own spheres of interest. The scramble for concessions accelerates as the Qing dynasty weakens further. In 1894 to 95, Japan defeats China in war, exposing the depths of Chinese military weakness. Western powers rush to secure additional privileges. More treaty ports, railway concessions, mining rights, territorial leases. It's as if the lessons of the Opium Wars have been forgotten, that forcing unequal treaties on China at gunpoint only deepens resentment and instability. But empires seldom learn from history. They are too busy making it. In 1900, the Boxer Rebellion erupts, a violent anti-foreign movement tacitly supported by the Dowager Empress Cixi. Foreign legations in Peking come under siege. An 8-nation alliance, including Britain, sends troops to crush the uprising and impose yet another punitive indemnity on China. The cycle of humiliation continues. By 1907, in the final year of your long life, you witness one change that offers a glimmer of hope. Britain and China sign an agreement to gradually reduce the opium trade. After decades of forcing opium on China, Western powers have finally acknowledged the devastating impact of the drug. Too late for the millions already addicted. Too late for the social fabric already torn, but perhaps not too late for future generations. On your final evening, seated in your favourite chair overlooking the harbour you've watched for half a century, you dictate a letter to your youngest granddaughter in London. She's asked about your life in China, about how Hong Kong came to be British, about your role in it all. How do you explain the complex legacy of the Opium Wars to a child? The commercial interests, the cultural misunderstandings, the gunboat diplomacy, the unequal treaties, the decades of resentment they sowed. My dear Elizabeth, you begin. You ask how Hong Kong became British. The simple answer is that we took it by force through war, but the true answer is more complicated. You dictate late into the night, trying to convey both the triumphs and costs of empire, the prosperity it brought to some, the suffering to others, the cultural treasures preserved and those destroyed, the fortunes made and lives ruined. History will judge us, you conclude, perhaps more harshly than we judge ourselves. Remember that empires rise and fall, but human dignity remains constant. I have seen much change in my long life, but this truth endures. As you finish dictating, dawn breaks over Hong Kong harbour. Ships from across the world still crowd the waters, steam now predominating over sail, iron over wood. The commerce continues, the empire still stands. But nothing lasts forever. The seeds of change planted during the Opium Wars, nationalism, modernization, resistance to foreign domination are growing throughout China. Within your granddaughter's lifetime, much of what seems permanent will transform again. The century of humiliation that began with the Opium Wars will eventually end. China will reclaim its sovereignty, its pride, its place in the world. Hong Kong itself will return to Chinese control, the great historical circle completed. But that morning in 1907, watching one final sunrise over the harbour you've known so long, you can only hope that future generations will learn from the past you helped create, both its glories and its shame. The opium that launched 2 wars, the treaties that reshaped East